Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, the podcast where we take a look at films from our youth and ask the age-old question of, is that any good? Today we are taking a look at 1939's The Wizard of Oz. This is an interesting sort of one for us because, I mean, I saw this film as a kid, I enjoyed this film as a kid, but I don't have... Like, usually, because I chose this one, usually when we choose a film, it's because, like, we have a special connection or special memories of it. I just sort of don't remember a time pre-Wizard of Oz. Like, I must have seen this film for the first time on TV when I was, like, I don't know, like 5 or younger or whatever. Like, because it's always been a part of my sort of cinema lexicon. So I don't really have a story about, like, oh, this is how I first saw it or whatever. And I also don't think it's, like, one of those films that I loved so much I went back to countless times through my youth. I've seen it a bunch, because who hasn't? Do you have a different history with the film, or is it about the same?
No, it's basically the same as you. I know I've seen it. I have vague memories of like watching it, but I can't pinpoint specific times. I think there are just some films that you just watch by osmosis, and like
right.
you definitely watch like maybe like Snow White is or Cinderella is another example of that, where it's not like you can specific. It's just always been there. You've always seen it. Definitely through. I didn't have it on video or DVD or anything like that. Sorry, I've never done that in my life. I don't know why I decided to suddenly call DVDs DVDs. DVDs or Blu-ray. I didn't have it
or the Blurrer.
Or the Blu-ray. Or the Betamax. That I just said normally, so I don't know what's happening here. The Buzz. I don't remember having it on the. I didn't have it on the Vuhas or the DVDs, but I do. So it definitely would have been.
Did you watch it on the Look at it?
Like on the what?
The Look at it.
The Look at it. What the television?
The LCD TV. The Look at it.
No. Nice. Very nice. No, I don't think our television was that high def when I was younger. So it would have been.
I just wanted an excuse to say a silly acronym, like in this weird this weird thing that's happening. Anyway, let's end that there because I'm.
You're right. Let's end it right there. So yeah, it would have been on telly, either on the Bubaka or the Atava.
We need to stop because this is amusing only us.
No, it would have been. Yeah, it would have definitely been an afternoon telly watch.
Yes,
for sure. But I do. Yeah, it's a weird one because, like you, I've got memories of watching it, and I know I've seen it. Yeah. I remembered the beats, but I partly because there's only like 5 beats, which isn't a criticism, by the way. But yeah, so I do remember it, but no specific memories at all. And I feel like I've also seen it live in some form, but I haven't seen Wicked live. Unless I have seen Wicked live, but really early, because obviously Wicked's been around for ages. But I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think I've seen Wicked live. I've seen the film, but I feel like I've seen it, kind of like my experience of watching the movie. I'm like, I think I've seen it on stage at some point.
Yeah, maybe you saw some sort of like panto version of it or something.
Yeah, I think maybe. I don't know. But look, it's good stuff. There we go. We're out. See you later.
Yeah, it's good stuff. That's our official seal.
It's good stuff. No, it is. It is. I think there's still a magic to it, even watching it older, for sure. What about you?
In terms of this viewing,
yeah,
this is going to be a complicated one. Okay, so my feelings on this are very mixed, and they are. I need to make sure that I frame them correctly, right? And I'm gonna have to make a weird video game analogy here, right? Video games, as a medium, I lived through them becoming a complex, functional storytelling medium. You know, I lived through Sonic, a game where the story was mostly in the instruction manual or made up by children, to games like Max Payne or even more modern, like Last of Us, telling these brilliant, complex stories. Sound was introduced to film 12 years before Dorothy Takes to the Yellow Brick Road. And I think we have to understand, contextually, that at this point, the spectacle of film, the novelty of film, was what you were partially going to see. And that was enough. And there was not as much, I don't think, thought going into the specifics of the storytelling. So, as a person who studied screenwriting, there are parts of my brain that scream at this film for many of its choices and its modelled character arcs and some other stuff that we'll get into. But I'm going to caveat all that by saying, obviously, this is an extremely fun, creative, like beautifully crafted film with incredible performances, for the time, some of the most astounding visuals, and obviously some of the most wonderful and iconic songs in cinema history. Did I enjoy this film and would I recommend it? Of course I did. It's a classic. There's a very good reason for it. But, but, it lacks any dramatic tension. Structurally, it's very sloppy. Pacing is a massive issue. And the final message and character arcs, while having the potential to be thoughtful and poignant, are very muddled. And we'll get into the details of why.
Oh, yeah.
But there are a huge number of issues.
You had the power. You had the power to go home all along. Well, you could have fucking mentioned that. Like I think Dorothy made it very clear. And I think,
yeah.
You just had to miss home. Really, she was banging on about missing home at the beginning. Like she really appreciated.
We'll get. I think there is an explanation of that built into the film, and we'll talk about it. But like, I'm not sure it's sufficient.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it's sufficient.
I'll tell you what that explanation is. That good witch saw this stranger kill one of her bad witches and thought, oh, I'm gonna make this girl kill the other.
Yeah. Right, let me ask you, let me just read you something very funny. So basically, in 1998, a guy called Rick Polito, Polito wrote a TV listing in like the American TV Guide for The Wizard of Oz, and this is how he described the film. Transported to a surreal landscape, a young girl kills the first person she meets, and then teams up with 3 strangers to kill again. It's an excellent description of this movie. Apparently, that's quite a famous TV listing. I didn't know there was such a thing as famous TV listings until I came across this, but that is very funny.
I didn't remember how anticlimactic. I mean, we're jumping here.
Yes.
Okay, well, then, let's do. Yeah, well, you've done overall thoughts. Let's go to spoilers, because obviously
we'll recommend it.
Even if there are some flaws, and like I say, and like you say, we both you phrased it so much more eloquently. But basically, it's good stuff, but it's missing a few beats. It's the sort of it's my opening gambit and your more eloquent point. But yeah, so obviously we're fucking recommending The Wizard of Oz, and like whilst a lot of it doesn't hold up, but that's not necessarily its fault because, as you say, it's just not what the medium of film was at the time. There's also some shit that fucking really holds up. The songs, and actually, I must say it, I think the special effects are still good. Like,
absolutely astounding.
It's insane. Like,
because almost all of
set design and stuff.
Almost all of this had to be captured in camera. Like they couldn't go in post. Yeah. Like there's only I think 2 composite shots in the entire movie or something like that. It's ridiculous. Almost all of this is in camera. The shot that blew my mind because it was just such a small thing was there's the moment when the witch sort of is fly, and she's sending all the monkeys off into the sky. In the background, you see all the dozens of little dots, very small silhouettes of the other monkeys that are already in the air going by. That's in camera. That's models being rotated around through the window physically because you can't add that in post. Like, it had to happen in camera because that's the only way to do this sort of thing.
It's mad, and
wonderful.
so obviously we recommend The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, of course
obviously it's amazing. So to jump full spoilers and to go heavy on the spoilers quickly, could you have told me pre-watching if I'd have said to you, how does the Wicked Witch get defeated? Mm-hmm. Did you remember that? Because let me tell you, accidentally gets some water on her and melts. I remember her melting, but I didn't realise it was so like, oh, okay. Oh, she's gone. Okay. Well, that was an accident.
Well, yeah.
I mean, and I guess it's good for Dorothy's character for it to be an accident. But, yeah. I was just like, oh, that's how that's done, is it? Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing how they handle that in Wicked for Good and make that dramatic.
You've stepped in someone there, because let me tell you, Wicked do a genius thing regarding that, in my opinion.
Oh, nice. Oh, you have to tell me off air.
But what's funny about that is, like, obviously in the first Wicked movie, there's the whole sequence when it starts to rain and the teacher, like, puts the barrier up to protect her from the water. They don't outright point it out, but it's in there's teasing. But we'll talk about what's potentially revealed in the second part of Wicked at a later time, because this podcast should be going up around the time of Wicked for Good coming out, and I don't want to spoil that on the podcast. So we're not going to spoil anything from Wicked in this. In fact, I'm going to very deliberately sort of, like, even though that we're releasing this alongside Wicked for Good, I am going to sort of put a little ban on. I'm going to put a pin in any ability to talk about Wicked, because what Wicked does is recontextualize a lot of what's in this film, and I think we need to be reviewing this film as it stands without extra knowledge from a supplemental piece of material. So I'm going to put a little pin in it, and I may give myself, a minute somewhere at the end to pull it out, and if I want to reference Wicked, I will. But we're almost certainly not going to talk about Wicked in this, for those reasons.
Yeah, Dan's gonna make a real concerted effort, and I was very sleepy when I watched Wicked, so I couldn't even if I wanted to.
Well, I've seen Wicked on stage a couple of times too, so like I'm almost more familiar with that story than I am this one. But I did remember that it was water because of how it's relevant to Wicked. And I guess it's kind of iconic, isn't it? Having, throwing water on the witch and her, I'm melting, so that's one of the more iconic scenes. But let's talk about the witch in dramatic tension, because you're right, you're absolutely right. It's one, anticlimactic, as most of this movie ends up being, but two, while having a scary presence, ultimately she never really poses any kind of practical threat, which makes her pretty sort of wishy-washy as a villain, because they tell us she's a threat, but also they tell us she can't hurt Dorothy while she's wearing the slippers. And then she kidnaps Dorothy, and you think, oh, she's just gonna, Dorothy's in trouble, the witch is just gonna kill her. And then she just, like, turns around a timer and is like, turns over an egg timer and is like, you'll die when it's done. Okay. There's no explanation.
Yeah, and also no, like, she gets out the room. How does that put an end to the timer? Like, what?
I think she turns the time. I think doesn't Dorothy turn the timer back round, or am I misremembering? I might be misremembering.
I can't remember. I may be. Yeah, I can't remember.
But my point being, look, the most threat that this woman ever causes to any of them, other than just being menacing and being performed brilliantly by Margaret Hamilton, is they fall asleep for a bit. That is the biggest obstacle she puts in their way. So what is the narrative threat? Because it's not the witch. When the wizard sends them on a side quest at the end of the movie to create the third act, and he goes, "You must retrieve the broom of the Wicked Witch of the West," I should be like, oh my god, that's going to be impossible. But I'm just like, yeah, they'll just grab it. They're just going to go grab it. There's no dramatic tension here. And again, I remind myself, this is 1927 was the jazz singer. Sorry, 1927 is the jazz singer, which is the first film with sound. 12 years earlier than this. Hollywood evolves across from between 1910 and 1920. This is how young Hollywood is. Hollywood isn't old enough to drink when this movie comes out. Like we just have to keep remembering that. It's really important.
Yeah.
You know, I'd hate to be judged, you know, by my thoughts and behaviors from when I was like 18 years old. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and as someone that knew Dan close to that time, let me tell you, that man's correct.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you agree, but it sounds like you do, because not only is it anticlimactic to take her out with water, but I just don't think she poses any kind of legitimate threat throughout any of the movie, which is like, it makes her performance fun but pointless. Like it's, you know, it's like she
throws.
Go on.
She throws some fire at the scarecrow, doesn't she?
Sort of, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
it doesn't do anything.
For a
yeah,
woman
she does.
For a woman that seemingly has such insane power that she can look at a circular Power Rangers style sort of orb, a live stream. She can look at a live stream of a field.
She's got a crystal ball, mate.
And
Isn't it just a crystal ball? Is that not the term for it?
Yeah, but you know, a live stream of a field is more fun for me. She could look at a live stream via a crystal ball.
Yeah, Dorothy. The problem there is actually Dorothy's given her that power because Dorothy is streaming her whole adventure on Twitch. So,
well, that's the shoes. Like she should have. Yeah, that's what's happening there.
Every now and then, Dorothy turns to the camera and is like, "Oh, thanks for the sub."
She's live streaming and she pulls a spell and an entire field turns into poisonous plants. The fact that she's got that kind of power and is, you know, turning over a sand timer, she doesn't. I think, you know, the movie tries to make her threat known and, you know, the field stuff or whatever, but yes, it doesn't. The problem is the way the movie does it. You're just left sort of questioning why she didn't fuck shit up a bit more.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse my language.
And while we're
maybe make a note. I think it's the first time we've sworn. We can try and avoid. More swears.
Yeah, it's fine. YouTube have actually just loosened for the first time in my time on YouTube their swearing rules for monetization. So.
Oh, fuck yeah.
I was going to say, fuck it, but I knew you were going to jump in, so we both done it now. It doesn't matter. Look, to stay on the train of things that don't work, but we're forgiving the movie because it was the 1930s, 1939 to be specific. Look, here's the thing. It's structurally deeply sloppy also. It just sort of bounces from scene to scene with no sense of narrative cohesion or sort of clear goals or progress. I mean, the goals change scene to scene. In Act 1, the goal is save Toto. In Act 2, the goal is get to the wizard. In Act 3, it's steal the witch's broom. It's just like side quest after side quest that the movie gives Dorothy, not through choice often. She's just sort of told that's just what you need to do. It's just like, we're doing this now. Okay. Now we're doing this. Okay. The movie just sort of decides what the plot is at any given time in a way that doesn't feel very natural or like it's progressing. And again, I'm caveating it again. Hollywood's a baby that we're learning. We're still learning, and that's okay. I wouldn't judge video games from the 90s with the same standards I judged video games today. So this is the same rule. But it is worth pointing out that if you're watching this from a modern context, that is not jarring, but it is an issue. As is with the pacing. There's the chunk in the middle of the movie where they do the same song after the same song on rotation 6 times. So it's, if I only had a blank, we're off to see the wizard. If I only had a blank, we're off to see the wizard. If I only had a blank, we're off to see the wizard. So there was an off to see the wizard before we started actually. So it's 7 times, and that's just 2 songs. 7 of the slots for songs are just 2 songs over and over again, with slightly adjusted lyrics. That's not good.
And do you think those? And this is almost impossible for us to judge, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't mind that so much because, you know, it's a banger, it's a tune. But do you think that's just how we've grown up listening to that song, and therefore it's just inherently ingrained within there, and as as catchy as a hymn, but like it's become a hymn for us because of growing up with it. And so, do you think that's more of a, say we'd never heard that song before? That's surely more of a problem, because like it didn't bother me that much, but I think it didn't bother me because you have to see there was it like no, sorry, it wasn't even that one. It's if I had it, like it's just so ingrained.
But it's both of them intertwined, because it literally is, we're off to see the wizard, and then it's like, oh, here's a scarecrow. He's like, if I only had a brain, and then we sing that one, and then I'm like, and then Dorothy bumps into, as she leaves, she's, oh, we're off to see the wizard, and then she bumps into the Tin Man. It's like, if I only had a heart, and it's like, it literally does that loop 3 times, and I think the issue, so you're right, one thing that eases it is that the music's very good. And repetition obviously makes you more familiar with the music, make you find it more catchy. Or tick tick tick, like that's good. I mean, if there's gonna be a song that repeats multiple times, it'll be either of those. They're both great. Absolutely agree. That definitely eases it.
Yeah.
But from a narrative perspective, I felt my attention wandering around this section of the movie, this middle act, because quite frankly, it is the same sequence of events 3 times over. We're off to see the wizard. She meets a random character who is missing a thing, and asks to join her on her quest, because the thing she's looking for, maybe the person who's giving that for her can give that to them. And then we were off to see the wizard, and then we meet the next character that has a thing that they're missing and wants to join the quest. And we just literally do the same scene after the same scene over and over for, it's like 25 minutes of the movie, I think. And that's actually quite a long time to be doing that. And the only variance we get is obviously what that character wants, and therefore how we are introduced to them. So obviously the Tin Man we find frozen. The lion tries to be intimidating and then turns out to be cowardly. So, there are small variances in those scenes, and obviously those characters are all brilliantly brought to life, so there's entertainment value in there. But just from a structural perspective, it's super repetitive, and that I definitely felt my brain like switching off during that section, which is a shame because the songs are great, they're performed brilliantly. I think what would have been nice, actually, I don't know, it's 5 minutes long. They cut out a dance sequence. The Scarecrow has a dance, which you can see on YouTube, and it is wonderful. It's incredible. It's the physical acting that Ray Bolger is doing. I did just check, by the way. That wasn't me taking a pause to remember. I had to look. But Ray Bolger does an amazing job with the Scarecrow and the physicality of the Scarecrow. And there's a reason specifically for that we'll come back to. But there's this sequence that's missing, that was removed to shorten the film, because when they first edited it together, it was like 2 hours long, and they were like, no, we've got to lose at least 15, 20 minutes here. That was one of the things that got cut, because it's like 4 minutes long, which is a long time for a single dance sequence. But I wonder if that had helped break it up, maybe, the structure, if we'd had a big long dance sequence, or would that have made it worse, because we were still in that section of the movie for much longer? I don't know, Chris. Don't have the answer. But I mean, I think to your question, I very quickly.
I think being in that...
Go on.
Sorry, go.
No.
No, you go.
I'll just say, to sum up the answer to your original question, was I do think the music helps, and the repetitive nature of the music does make it easier, because I know the songs, I'm familiar with the songs, their songs are catchy. That definitely, if I didn't go into the movie knowing that, I would maybe have found this even, or maybe that's how they get you to find it catchy, by making you listen to them 6 times.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I suppose everyone that's watched a movie once has listened to the song 6 times at some point. I don't think, as much as at the beginning I thought they would, because it's hinted at, I think, in the opening.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, quickly, my point was going to be, I think having a big dart, I think making that sequence longer would have made it worse.
Very maybe. I do recommend people who are interested, though, going on YouTube and finding that deleted dance number, because it is spectacular. It's just Ray Bolger and his incredible physicality and doing wire work, and he's like leaping out of the up into the air, and like and doing all these weird little dance moves and stuff, and it's I don't know, it's really, really good. It's extremely well put together. It's a shame, but yeah.
I can't remember what I was going to say now. I was surprised somewhere over the rainbow wasn't used more. Like the overture of that, I was expecting to be used throughout when it was used at the beginning.
There was a reprise at the end. In the original cut, that was one of the things that was cut to bring it down from 2 hours to 1:40. So there was there's sort of a reprise once she sort of quote unquote learned her lesson, which we'll come back to, that they removed for that reason, because they were just absolutely convinced there is no way. I mean, movies at the time, an hour and a half was pushing it for a feature at the time. You know, it was between an hour and a half. An hour and a half was the top end of it. This is an hour and 40. So at the time, studios were like, will an audience sit in a room for this long? This seems like too much, because that just wasn't the done thing. I think the average film at this point was like an hour and 15. I think that was the average. So yeah, they felt 2 hours was just far too long. They were convinced, so a lot of stuff got cut. If you'll notice, the last act of the movie is basically musicless. From the point in which they come to the witch, there's basically no songs, and that's because the songs were all taken out from that end of the movie, which I actually think improves the pacing, because like once we're on the action adventure path, to stop to sing would feel worse from a pacing perspective.
Yeah, I think also a 2 hour version of this would be too long. It is a stretch at the hour and 45 it currently is, I think.
Yeah,
I would
agree with that. So while we're on some of the things that I was like, so I'm sort of slowly picking through my list of things that I don't think work from a script writing perspective. So we talked about the lack of dramatic tension, the structurally and the pacing are a bit sloppy. Do you mind, Chris, if I go on a small rant about the message and the character stuff in this movie?
Go away, my friend.
So
rant away.
The final message has the potential to be thoughtful and poignant, right? But it ultimately finds itself sort of muddled due to the choices surrounding it. So, one, I don't think it's right to just have a character say to Dorothy, and what have you learned, Dorothy? And then Dorothy chimes in with her lesson. That's not great. She just goes, I think I've learned this, which is, just don't have it in dialogue. But what's more frustrating is I think there is a good message in this that is lost in some bad storytelling choices. So, what I think the message was intended to be, and the thing that I think works in this movie, is the notion that often people look for fulfillment in things that will not fulfill them. People think things they want will solve them. Not a specific issue they're experiencing, but will just solve them. People who want money or fame or, whatever. We hear this all the time. Lottery winners saying, it's made my life worse. I thought I wanted money and it would make my life complete in some way. But there are people with other goals. I want this, I want that. If only I had a new car. Sounds awfully like if I only had a brain. You know what I mean? Like people, there's always an object, and it can be small, like if I had a new kitchen, in my house, or it can be big, like if only I was rich and famous. And no matter what it is, the if only I had will not fill whatever hole in your heart you're trying to fill, right? And what I love about this movie is that
I wish you remembered that every time you thought, if only I had a new podcast talking about another animated kids show.
Hey, well, I'm not. To be fair, Chris, it's been like 5 years since I've done that, so I think I've kicked that habit.
Yeah. That's fair.
The problem now is that the kids shows we chose are about to come back. That's the issue.
Yeah,
for those who don't know, we did a
Avatar.
Go on.
Avatar was less than 5 years ago because you were so grouchy that we missed the lockdown.
You're right. That might have been 4 years ago. Then yeah, you're right. That might have been 4 years ago. Well, I'll have to double check when we started that. But anyway, my point is that as a story for the movie, right? Having Dorothy learn that actually, for fulfillment, it's not there's another thing over the rainbow that will make me happy. It's if I can't find it in myself, no object I acquire is ever going to fill the hole. Right? And that is a glorious message. And she even sums it up in that dialogue, which I have criticized choosing to have her just say the lesson out loud. It's written really well. I've got the quote. So Glinda the Good Witch says, "And what have you learned, Dorothy?" And she says that it wasn't enough to just want to see Uncle Henry and Auntie Em, and that if I ever go looking for my heart's desire again, I won't look any further than my own backyard, because if it isn't there, I never really lost it to begin with. Okay. That, combined with what they do with her companions, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion, is genius, because they go on the journey with Dorothy, attempting to fill holes with stuff they do not need. The Scarecrow says he doesn't have a brain, he can't put a thought together, yet what's the first thing he does? He comes up with a plan for them to get apples. He does have a brain. He had it from the start. The Tin Man talks about not having a heart, but he's the most emotionally in tune character of all of them. The guy cries like 4 times in the movie. He's constantly expressing huge amounts of emotion. The Cowardly Lion, for all of his cowardice, comes with them on a journey to steal the broom from the scariest figure of this world.
But that, for the purpose of discussion, that's the point, though, isn't it? So what's your issue? The fact that none of them notice it in each other, or the fact that Dorothy doesn't notice it in them?
You are so... Yes, there are 2 problems, which is what I'm getting to. Because that's my sort of positive, like, this is what works about the movie, what I love about the film. What doesn't function for me is that they don't learn the lesson, number 1. They get given trinkets and think they're better for it. That's what happens. Also, the Scarecrow, when
going to be, when we get there, that's going to be my whole approach to parenting, Dan. So let's not shit on that approach too much.
The Scarecrow does a sum, which, by the way, he does get wrong. Apparently, I don't know enough about the algebra, but apparently that is wrong. What he says, the thing about the isosceles triangle, the square root, the equal to the sides, whatever that nonsense is, that's apparently not correct. But
okay, I'll defend that though. I like the fact that it's wrong because it shows that it just reflects that it was in him all along. It's just giving him the confidence.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, I don't disagree with that. But I do not like that they don't learn a lesson at all, that they just get their trinkets and are happy with that. That is bothersome to me, because also it would be a great way for Dorothy to learn her lesson if she witnesses them, because then that fixes the issue of her just saying it out loud. But the bigger issue, and the real reason that I have a huge issue with the way this film does it, is how they muddle it with writing. And I realise that the issue here is just they didn't care or think about this in this level of depth, because, again, 1939. I understand that, but I'm going to review the movie as it stands. The last thing she says in this movie is that I'm not going to leave here ever again. That's not the lesson, Dorothy. Having her repeat the sentence, "There's no place like home," is not the lesson. It's not about whether she's home or journeying or whatever. The lesson should be about true happiness will come from inside you wherever you are. Not, I must be home. So by making it "there's no place like home" and "I'm never leaving ever again because I love you all," they're basically crapping on their own message. It completely undermines itself, because the movie, like, she runs away at the beginning and it's because she thinks there's something better over the rainbow. She learns that while fun and adventure is out there, and that can be good, it won't fill the hole. That's a great message. Don't have her then go, "Well, I'm never leaving home again. I'm done adventuring. That's not for me. There's nothing but pain and suffering doing that. Won't help me at all." Like, what are we doing? How could we fail so spectacularly to understand the lesson that is in the movie so explicitly? And there's only 2 explanations for this. One is that maybe the lesson is as I have hoped it would be in the original text, and they've taken that and then muddled it up themselves because they didn't fully understand the thing they were adapting. That's possibility number 1. Or possibility number 2 is no one thought about it this deeply, which is very possible. But I genuinely believe that by having the dialogue that it uses the phrase, which I know is iconic, but "there's no place like home," and the sentence at the end where she says that she is never going to leave again, massively hurts her arc and the point the film is trying to make. I really believe that. So when you combine that with the other three ding-dongs not learning anything, it's a real mess. And it's just such a shame to see a movie with such a clear and nice message, and actually quite a poignant one, for like a surprisingly deep one for a film from this era, in my opinion. Because I think that's that's something that a lot of people go their whole lives without learning. Do you know what I mean? Like the people are always trying to fill their empty souls with stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm so on board with that, and then it's like, yeah, they just fall over the last hurdle, and it's like really, it hurts. It hurts to watch. It's bad storytelling, unfortunately, and it hurts Dorothy as a character, because it's like, for a minute I thought she'd learned something, and then she doesn't. So yeah, sorry, didn't work for me.
No, I agree. No, yeah, and I think that. Yeah, the trouble is there's no defense to any of that. But the only defense is the one you've already given, which is film was just invented. Yeah, because I do think you're right. Even if, or maybe even it's have Dorothy realize it about them. About the other three, and she tells them, and then they make her look much inward, better. And she realizes it about herself. It's
much better. Have Dorothy be like, but wait a minute, after the wizard's handing out his trinket,
it's quite literally handed to them.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, I was really keen to make that point.
No, exactly.
It's literally handed to them on a plate.
Yeah, and look, I've seen people over-intellectualize this and say that like Toto is sort of acts as Dorothy's spirit guide, because it's also technically handed to her on a plate, isn't it? Because the wizard says to her, "Well, I've got a balloon. You can get in this and you can go." And if she'd stayed in the balloon, she might not have realized the lesson she was supposed to learn, right? But instead, Toto jumps out the balloon. She follows. The balloon leaves without her. And then she's forced to reckon with what she's learnt. And the other three
mad by the way that none of them thought. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but it's fucking mad that none of them thought to tie that balloon down, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
the other three should be in charge.
Yeah, I mean, the choice there to have her step out, you could argue, is a creative one, and to like have her be different. And maybe they deliberately drawing a contrast between Dorothy and them. They've taken the easy way out. Dorothy hasn't. Guided by Toto, but still, it would be better if she'd made the choice. If she'd have gone, I think you're right. I think if she'd have basically turned to the wizard and said, "No, this is too easy. I have to make this is a journey I have to make for myself," and if she then turned to the three ding-dongs and said, "Well, wait a minute, you didn't need her, huh? You've been emotional all along, and Scarecrow, you helped us out when you came up with this plan, and and Lion, you just faced the Wicked Witch of the West." Like if we'd have had that as a dialogue, apologies for my dreadful Dorothy, but if we'd have done that, the movie works a lot better for me, because then we've demonstrated she's learned it, rather than having Galinda be like, "Now, Dorothy, what have you learned? And if you get this wrong, I don't send you home." And here's the other thing, right? And this is something you touched on. The whole, why did she have to sort of go on this journey at all? Why did she have to learn it for herself, quote unquote, as the movie lays it out? I might be over-intellectualizing this also. This might be folly. But I do think that is a lesson a person can only ever learn themselves by attempting to fulfill themselves with stuff and achievements and quests. Life is a collection of side quests, right? This podcast is one of our side quests, Chris. Do you know what I mean? There is something in... We only had to do it to realize it was never going to make us happy and we should stop. No, I'm kidding. We had to do it. You have to attempt to better yourself, attempt to get stuff, attempt to learn things in order to realize that they may not be the thing that fulfills you, so you can then sort of look more inward. So that's part of it. I think a big part of it is what Galinda says to Dorothy at the end.
Whoa! Is that what you're saying we've done with this podcast? Because I thought the lesson with the podcast was more like, if you make an effort, you can retain a friendship that would naturally drift after uni.
Right, but that's my point.
if you make the effort to.
Exactly right.
You've made it some sort of existential crisis.
No, I did what the movie did. I muddled it. I put in a joke that muddled my meaning. Is what actually happened there. I tried to make a joke about how I tried to do a self-deprecating joke about how we're like trapped in a thing. We like making it sound like we hate doing the podcast or something. But that was obviously a joke. No, that is
right.
My point. My actual point is what you were hinting at, which is like, you know, we didn't start the podcast necessarily knowing what it would do for us. We had to do the podcast to learn how it might enrich our lives. So Dorothy has to. She can't just be sent home by Galinda minute one and told the lesson, because one, I don't think she'd buy it, but two, she'll only thoroughly learn it when she's experienced it for herself. The journey she goes on throughout the movie is what teaches her that, the same way that you and I actually doing this podcast for nearly 14 years now. As it's become clear what this is giving, what we're getting out of this. Does that make sense? So you're right, Galinda.
And I think we could achieve that
Go on.
with less podcasts. I'm joking. Carry on.
I mean, we're doing the smallest number of podcasts we've ever done. So
yeah, that's true.
We were slowly reducing our podcast output for a few years because I knew the billing baby was on the way. Even before the billing baby.
Say, that only took you moving country and me having a child.
We were slowing down a bit before that. I think. I feel like I've been slowly reducing our podcast output for years because I knew even before Australia, I knew there was a billing baby in the nearish future. But anyway, so my point to it's a very laboured metaphor. Your point originally about why Galinda was a bit mean and just like didn't tell Dorothy that she could just click her heels and go home from the beginning. I think it's for exactly that reason. Now, I could be attributing more thought to this story than the writers of this story put into it. I think there's a real chance that's true, and I have, you know, attempted to read and listen to some material of people, you know, intellectualizing this film in the last few days as I've been doing research on it, and all of them I ended up switching off because I was just like, no, there's no way they were thinking about it this deeply. There are some really interesting things about war allegories and things like that. And look, maybe in the novel, L. Frank Baum's novel, there was some stuff like that, but this film, no, no, unfortunately not. So I might have just massively over-intellectualized this film, massively. But let's just do some sort of like more general stuff, because I think we've hit on all the things right. So we've gone out the gate by basically going through the things that I think don't work about the film on a larger scale. So let's talk about the fun, creative, dumb stuff, because there's tons of it. It's a great movie. let's do that for a bit, unless you've got any wider points you want to make.
No. I think you've covered all the.
Christ,
all of them.
I've just realised I've got one other one. Oh no, I don't like this.
We're off to see the Grouchy Podcaster. The Grouchy Podcaster Rewind Reviews.
I forgot. I don't like that it's all a dream. I
tell you what I don't like about that is
I don't like it.
My memory of that. If you'd have asked me, what happens at the end? Is it a dream? I'd have said
ambiguous.
Oh well, I think it's ambiguous,
yes.
Or I think it seems like it's a dream, and then there's a hint that it's not. And I've thought of one, by the way. It would be amazing. You could subtly do it. At the end, she gets out of bed, and she's got the shoes on.
That was the plan.
And maybe how cool would it be if the shoes were like red in that sort of sepia filter that they put on? Yeah. Like that. I think that would be really that was the plan. Maybe something like that.
They cut it.
Really?
That was the plan. They cut it. They were worried about audiences.
Oh wow.
You exactly have described what the ending of this movie originally was. So I very quickly, for context, once again, birth of Hollywood. They weren't genre films yet, really. Films were gangster movies and westerns, but they were period pieces and love stories. But they were all people in very naturalistic rooms having naturalistic conversations. Genre films had not really taken off in any major way at this point. It's not to say there hadn't been attempts, but they were not the bulk of what Hollywood was producing. There was a real concern with this film about audiences accepting the fantasy elements of it, and their solution was to make it all a dream. And at first they had it a bit ambiguous. They had the ruby slippers appear in the real world at the end to sort of give you a maybe it all was real. But in the end they settled on that they were worried audiences wouldn't accept that and would find that too far-fetched. So they settled on what we got, which is very, I think, definitively in this film, it was in her head. She gets clonked on the head really hard, then she wakes up, and it was clearly all a dream. The movie is absolutely indicating that with very little ambiguity, and I hate that. I hate that so much.
Yeah, I think it's a real shame. I do. And just a subtle. Well, what they had planned originally would have been great. I get, because also it just makes it is the more logical explanation in the movie. You know, the fact that everyone in, well, not everyone, but the fact that the majority of the people in Oz are from her real life. And you know, that's a fairly big indication that it's probably a dream. And the fact that she gets smashed in the head by a window and sort of passes out, also you know, screams dream. But I think you just kind of, it's so magical and, like, you know, it's so vibrant that you just sort of wish that was the case. Because if you think about it, also, like, you know, yeah, she learns a lesson and she gets to go home, but also visually, what that does is, like, it returns, because I wouldn't have been sure on that. My memory, I wouldn't have known we definitely went back to sort of the brown state of things. I was like, oh, maybe it stays in colour even when she returns to the real world because she's learnt to appreciate it. So, no, we're just, boom, back to sepia, which, you know, is also like you say, it's like,
a very distinct look, that sepia, isn't it? I'm glad it's sepia
right.
rather than traditional black and white. I think the sepia looks really,
yeah, well, that sort of surprised me as well. If you'd have said going in, I'd have been like, oh, I think the beginning's in black and white. I didn't remember the sort of brown tone to it.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite effective.
It was. I agree. I think it looks really good.
So to name some good things, the dialogue is in places, not in all places, but the dialogue is in places very, very sharp, very, very modern, very, you know, has a modern sensibility to some of the jokes. Can
I read my favourite?
Yeah, go.
My favourite is, well, what has Dorothy done? I'm all but lame from the bite on my leg. You mean she bit you? No, her dog. Oh, she bit a dog, eh? I had to pause it, Chris, because when he said, "Oh, she bit a dog," eh? I actually lost it. I had to pause it.
I am Oz, the great and powerful. Who am I kidding? I'm just a very bad wizard.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's so much great dialogue. So this movie has obviously the funny dialogue like that, which is just really witty and quite sharp. I like that you know, that Dorothy's uncle is like being a real difficult with the what's she called, Mrs. Mrs. Gulch, Miss Gulch, the neighbor that's a problem. I like that, but also it's got so much great iconic dialogue. Like, you know, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. God, does that feel prescient today? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and what I loved, like the notion that that's probably the best, because let's be honest, not to you know, also criticism, but fucking hell is in terms of the Tin Man, the Lion, and the Scarecrow. Fucking hell, sorry, excuse my language, apologies again. I guess we're not monetized, unless we're playing really fast and loose with their laxed rules. But it's shoehorned in, like the references to courage and bravery, and how that man saves her from the cleanest pigsty in the world, because she's wearing, from what I can tell, a white dress, falls in a pigsty, and comes out completely clean. So here's, you know, the whole references to, I don't know why you're scared, all of that stuff.
Yeah,
right?
well, no, it's even worse. At one point, she says to the guy that plays the scarecrow, or she says to him, "Your head ain't made of straw." She tells the guy that plays the lion, "Have a little courage." And there's a point when she's talking to to Miss Gulch, and she says, "You wicked old witch." And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, it almost feels written afterwards.
Yeah.
But the parallel of the carnival guy, who's also like this
wizard,
mystic
yes.
guy, like in this case, well-meaning, but the notion of that character, because obviously those people are often accused of being con artists.
He's called Professor Marvel.
Character, yeah. Him then tricking with the Oz and actually being behind a curtain and having a screen to do like a Zordon effect. Like that parallel and that connection between the real world and the Oz counterpart was phenomenal and so layered. Like a really, really great choice. And like I say, I think the best counterpart, real world Oz counterpart scenario.
I agree. And I think what's really cool about that is he offers Dorothy choices like he does later on, and in this example she takes the bait, and whereas later on she chooses not to. But I really like that scene. I think I love that scene a lot, because I think this idea that he's seen that this is like a young girl, she's run away from home, she's got some learning to do before she's maybe ready, she's got some maturing to do before she's ready to leave home, and he knows that. So he just sort of like, he lies to her and he tricks her to get her to go home, but he knows it's for the best sort of thing, which is like a really nice. So I like the Professor Marvel character. He's good, and obviously how he. What I like as well is if we're saying that Dorothy's dream. If Oz is Dorothy's dream, then we're also sort of implying that deep down she knew he was a charlatan. She knew he was a snake oil salesman, because obviously she wouldn't have made him the man behind the curtain in the dream if she didn't suspect he was talking shite originally. So that's quite a nice little thing.
Didn't stop her wanting to travel the world with him, but but yes.
Well, I think she offers to travel the world with him before he then reads her mind or whatever, or sees the future.
No, she did, yeah, that is how it goes.
And then as soon as he does that, she runs off back home, to be fair. And while she's yelling, "Oh, I can't leave Aunt Em, she might get ill," I think maybe she's thinking, I better get away from this weirdo. Yeah, it's a good stuff. It's good stuff. But yeah, you're right. The stuff at the beginning isn't very subtle, unfortunately. But Over the Rainbow is spectacular. By the way, we should talk about Over the Rainbow. It's such a spectacular scene, and it's in that early section of the movie where, like, before we're even at Oz, and it's like maybe one of the highlights of the movie. Like it's like she's Luke Skywalker before Luke Skywalker, yearning for more. You know what I mean? And like, what a brilliant way to do it. Which kind of makes it like, when you think about her sat there singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and then you think about the end of the movie where she's like, "I'm never leaving ever." I'm just like, oh. Imagine if Star Wars ended with Luke Skywalker being like, "And I'm never gonna leave Tatooine again."
Yeah, it's bad. It is bad. But like you say, that song and her, and to be fair, every single performance in this movie is amazing. That's the other thing. The acting is spectacular. Obviously, Judy Garland is a treasure, and is wonderful. But actually, everyone's delivering. Everyone's so committed. Everyone's so just giving it their all. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, to call out the sort of the key performances in this film, obviously Margaret Hamilton as the Wicked Witch and Miss Gulch is just a wonderful, energetic performance. Like, she understands exactly what movie she's in, and she goes for it with all her heart. And it's like her commitment to this sort of version of a sort of a witch, this really overt sort of quote unquote hag version of a witch, is brilliant. And obviously Billy Burke is great as Glinda. She's got that sort of wonderful naive charm to her. It's unfortunate that they hadn't figured out the thing that makes Glinda so interesting in the Wicked stuff yet, which is this sort of conceited side of her where some of it's maybe a bit falsely presented.
Put in a pin.
Sorry, pin goes back in. Sorry, I shouldn't have let that go. Basically, Glinda at this point is what she seems. She's the good witch, and that is all she is, which makes her less dimensioned as she later becomes, but perfect for this film. And then obviously, Ray Bolger, Burt Lair, and Jack Haley, the physicality they bring to the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man is incredible. I mean, Ray Bolger's sort of physicality as the Scarecrow and the sort of weird walk he does and the floppy way he behaves is just incredible. It's spectacular. They're all really good. I mean, God, when Burt Lair gets punched in the face by Dorothy and his tone and shift, it's just a wonderful shift. And obviously Jack Haley's Tin Man's brilliant as well, because that it can't be easy to play a character that's sort of stiff, so to speak. And then of course, we've already talked about Frank Morgan playing Professor Marvel / the Wizard of Oz. They're great. And then obviously Judy Garland's amazing. But we already singled her out. But I mean, the whole cast, top to bottom, even the group that play the Munchkins, who we'll talk about a little bit more in trivia, they're spectacular, even if very few of them actually spoke English, which, again, we'll get to. You'll be surprised to hear, Chris, they were in America to escape the Nazis. I wish that was a joke.
Jesus, right.
But yeah, it's there's oh mate, it gets if we titled these podcasts, Chris, the trivia section for this movie would just be called "It Gets Worse," because every piece of trivia is worse than the last. Prepared to be very depressed.
Dear.
I'm not kidding you. This is the single most depressing trivia I've ever looked into, and it was 7 hours of just the most miserable research. But we'll come back to all that. Let's talk about good things though. Before
we do that, I think the other big, because obviously we've done music, we've done performance. The other big glaring, amazing thing we've not talked about is the set design and the visuals of Oz in particular, like the corridor. Like as they're on their way to see Oz, to see the wizard, like that corridor shot looks spectacular. The set design of like the town folk, like Ding Dong, the witch is dead. That's another amazing thing with the coroner singing about how she definitely is dead.
Oh my god, that was so funny. That's another. I paused it for a second moment. There are a few of those in this movie, but my god, I cracked up at that. She is most clearly, definitely dead. I was just like, oh my god, it's so good.
It's amazing. Yeah, but the whole thing looks. And even like the sepia stuff, like the farmhouse looks great, and it's all brilliant. And we've already kind of talked about the special effects and how amazing, and it, in my opinion, still holds up some of that looks. Spectacular. But the set design specifically looks phenomenal. So textured, so vibrant, so colourful. Amazing.
Yeah, and I think, for a movie that literally does 0 location shooting, everything in this movie is a soundstage, with the exception of the shot of clouds at the beginning. Every single shot in this movie was filmed on a soundstage. Nothing was shot in the outside world whatsoever. And it gives the movie this really, really fun sort of tone. Because it just makes it feel more sort of like magical and weird, because there's just always like a beautiful matte painting in the background that's kind of giving the impression of the distance, the rolling hills or whatever, and they're all beautifully painted and look amazing. And you can tell it's a matte painting, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's a big painted wall at the back of the room. I don't know. Actually, I think matte painting is a specific technique where they do the painting and then composite it in, whereas these were actually like paintings on walls. So I guess it's not right to describe it as that. But either way, like these beautiful ways they use tricks to make the sets look longer than they are is just absolutely stunning. It gives the movie such scale. For a movie on sound stages, it never has that Star Trek problem. For those who've ever watched early Star Trek, they're on an alien planet, and all of the action takes place in a sort of several feet square, because the set only extends so far. You almost feel like the characters being like, what if there's something going on over there? No, we can't go over there. Because there's nothing. It feels like there's nothing beyond what the camera is showing us. It feels like the planet is a few feet wide. Whereas in The Wizard of Oz, it just feels like the world is expansive. The things just go on forever. So yeah, absolutely stunning. And as Chris already mentioned, the special effects are just spectacular. Like it's hard to explain how good. And the costumes, have we talked about the costumes? We haven't, I don't think. But my God.
I don't think so, no.
Very, very impressive work. Like, the Tin Man looks great. The Scarecrow looks great. I mean, that weird effect on his face, that sort of where he looks like he's wearing he's like made of burlap or whatever. He's got like a pattern. It's just, yeah, they're amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's the scale of it's just crazy, and I don't think I'll ever quite get over how they did that, because it's very impressive. Were there any other things I wanted to talk about? We talked about the sepia thing. Do you think Dorothy's a little mad at her auntie and uncle at the beginning of the movie when they're just like, then they just immediately buckle when that lady's like, I've got a piece of paper that says I can kill your dog? They're just like, well, she does have a piece of paper.
It's so difficult, isn't it? Because I thought you were going to bring up the fact that, like, she's like, the dog got her, and they're like, yeah, we're trying to save these chickens. Like, talking about one animal and other animals here. It's so tricky because you just don't know the politics of the town, or maybe the job doesn't do a good enough job to showcase that. But I don't think that woman's even got a paper from the sheriff. I think she's made it up, and she's abusing her richness and power. But they're, as they say, she's rich. They're poor. She's saying this and saying they've got to take it. I don't think they like it, but I think just the societal situation means that they have to do that. If you were to respond to that with, I think you're adding more than is in the text there, I would say fair enough.
Well, no, I'd be a hypocrite for saying that, because I think I've done that multiple times in this podcast. I think I've put more thought into this movie's script than the people who wrote it, to be honest with you, Chris. No, that's not fair. That's not fair. I'm joking. But yeah,
So yeah, I think she's right to be upset, but I don't think they come across as monsters in it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I tell you, when they do come across as monsters, when the tornadoes hit and her aunt is the only one that gives a fuck about where Dorothy is, that's where they come across like monsters.
Everyone else is like, get to shelter. There's a child running around here somewhere. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. We love you, Dorothy. Not enough to, face the tornado. But we love you.
That's another brilliant effect, by the way. We haven't talked about that. My God,
yeah, it looks amazing.
The tornado. And also, we haven't even talked about the transition to colour. Can I just compliment the movie for a second on how they transition to colour? Because, so the original plan was to do some weird thing where they were going to paint sepia. They were going to stencil sepia over the actual frames of the movie, frame by frame, right? And then slowly animate it out, so the sepia would fade out of the image and bring up the color. That was the plan, right? But it was expensive and costly, and it was going to require a huge amount of manpower, so they chose not to do it. Their solution, and this was a reshoot, Chris, I just want to point this out, this was not part of the original production, was they decided what they were going to do is they were going to put Dorothy's stand-in in a dress that is identical but coloured in sepia, inside a sepia-coloured set of the inside of the house, and then have her open the door to the colourful set, stand aside, and then have Judy Garland, move into frame in her colour outfit as she crossed that threshold. So they did the whole thing in camera, and it is fucking brilliant.
Wow. That's insane. It looks phenomenal. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant effect.
It's so good. I mean, the tornado stuff looks amazing too. I should clarify, the house lifting up and all that stuff looks amazing. Again, especially for the time. But it is crazy to me how well that transition works and how simple that solution is. Yeah, just paint a set those colours and put Dorothy in that costume. Yeah, cool. They'll put the stand-in the sepia version of the costume. It's genius.
So what? Because you said, so I know we're treading on Triv here, but it seems like a sensible place to do it. And I know we are probably moments away from actually doing Triv. But you said there are two shots that aren't practical. But in my head, I'm like, The way Glinda is, which I've having seen Wicked, it's insane that I learned on this podcast that the good witch is called Glinda. But there we go. I need to rewatch Wicked. I think in a less sleepy
Yeah, she
state.
might just be called the good witch in this movie. To be fair, but I think she's Glinda the good witch.
Okay. Yeah, but my point is, I have seen Wicked. I should.
Oh, is it? Well, especially because a big point of that movie is that she changes her name in the movie because of that's a big story point. You need to watch Wicked again. I think
what we're learning here, Dan, is I slept through more of Wicked than I thought. What was I going to say? Glinda, yeah, Glinda, the way Glinda appears and goes again, and obviously the tornado stuff, and like the her turning into her going from the neighbor to the bad witch. Are those the two?
Nope.
Like,
you're so close.
Are you going to tell me that the tornado was done practically?
Yes, with a projector on a sheet of fabric. So they had filmed that stuff, edited it, and were projecting it onto a sheet of fabric. They were like pulling back and forth over the window. So that's in camera. You're precisely right on Glinda appearing. That is a composite effect for the glass bubble that she appears from within. So you nailed that one. It's a good spot. The other is the crystal ball that shows video feed of Dorothy.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So as far as I know, and look, there are people who know a lot more about this sort of thing, film historians who might be able to tell me there's more compositing than I'm aware of. Maybe I've missed some of it. I had read there were only two. Those were the two I had already noticed, so it matched up. But it might turn out that there's more compositing than I'm familiar with in this film. But those are the only two shots that were like actual composites that I'm aware of. The tornado was done practically. It's really cool how they did that. Projecting onto a cloth is such a, again, simple and elegant solution for that effect, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's insane. That's mad. I love the way, by the way, you're giving me far too much credit. Like, it's literally for spotting the good witch stuff. Like, she literally, like they didn't. Well, the actress didn't disappear into a ball of light, did she?
Well,
I should get points for that.
No, because to be fair, when the Wicked Witch disappears, that's practical, and she just literally gets. They built an elevator into the ground that pulls her down out so the smoke goes up and the fire goes up, but she's already under the stage because the hole has opened up and she's gone through it. We'll come back to that, unfortunately, but for sadder reasons. But that is how they have achieved that. So that's in camera too. So there's nothing to say they couldn't have had Glinda pop up in a puff of smoke similarly. But yeah, the effect of the orb had to be achieved with special effects, unfortunately. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to pop out of a bubble.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah,
should we do the thing, Dan?
Very quick, just to summarise that, we should do a little summary. It's a great film.
As you're summarising, can I pee quickly?
You should pee quickly. You should pee quickly. Look, thank you. It's, as I stated at the beginning, it's a fun, creative, beautifully crafted movie, and it should be the film that it is. Like there is it's not overrated. It's not earned classic status that it is unworthy of. I'm not saying a lot of people are saying that, but I'm sure there are people that think that. This movie, having watched it, is the classic it is labelled as. It is influential for a number of reasons. That so many movies don't exist if this movie doesn't exist. And while it didn't find popularity till later in its time, it has. How many movies from 1939 can you name? Because I can guarantee you it's not many, and there's a reason for that. It is while flawed, an absolutely brilliant piece of cinema, and the love and attention that went into the craft of making this film should not be ignored, even if I think there are elements of the script that feel a little straightforward and maybe even don't work, or maybe a little lazy. The film itself is spectacular, so it is a massive recommend. If you have not seen this somehow, or you've not seen it recently, you should definitely crack it out, because it's well worth an hour and 40 of your time. So yeah, I wonder if I summed up quicker than Chris managed to use the toilet. That's the question. He's 2 seconds away, he tells me. We'll give it a second, because we can't start the triv until Chris says the thing he says. That's just the facts. Well,
I'm back. And I agree with everything you just said. Like, I look forward to, as I don't know, every episode could be someone's first, but as has been sort of stated, I recently had a daughter, and I watched it thinking, I look forward to showing her this. It'll be amazing to see, what the modern day attention span of a young child says about the pacing. But then that was a thing for us when we were younger, and we still watched it and felt it was a classic and stuff. And yeah, I think it would be amazing to show her this, and like you say, that just means that despite the flaws, it's still a classic for a reason, and it still works in the main as well, especially for that younger audience. And then you blow their mind a few years later with Wicked, and she'll turn to me and say, "You fucking slept through that again? Like, wake up, watch Wicked, man."
And you'll be like, "What's the witch called?"
Yeah, Glenda, Glenny.
Now, I want you to.
Earlier. I did a quick look at Wicked. So the Scarecrow's in Wicked. Have I already met the Scarecrow? Is the Scarecrow in the first movie?
Yes.
Oh.
He's not a scarecrow yet.
Yeah. I didn't really look too much at who it was. Is it Jonathan Bailey's character?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
Because the people listening to this might not have seen Wicked or Wicked for Good yet, and I don't want to give away where it goes. But if you've seen the musical, you know. But yeah, there are characters in the first part 1 of Wicked that become the iconic Wizard of Oz characters.
Oh, hot damn!
That's
okay.
covered. There's a little lion. There's a little lion cub in Wicked. That one I can spoil because that's like that's just a lion cub. There's no sort of like reveal of that. There's a lion that they save and release into the nearby wilderness in that movie. You don't remember that movie at all, do you? Like, it's amazing.
I really need to.
Well, look,
I really need to rewatch that movie.
Now
I
remember
the end, and I remember thinking that was pretty cool. That last sequence, I thought that was pretty exciting, exhilarating.
Yes.
So yeah,
I would like you to before we do the trip, Chris. I just want you to remember this feeling. Right? We've just complimented this movie. We've talked about the craft that went into it, the hard work that brought this incredible movie to life. The production is second to none in terms of this era. They achieved so much, and I want you to keep that in mind and remember this happy feeling, because we're about to discover that everyone on this that worked on this film should probably be in jail. So.
And with that in mind, let's trim it up.
I'm going to give you some trivia. So, this is more than some trivia. This is going to take a little while, but let's dive in. And again, this trivia will be titled "It Only Gets Worse," because it will just as we go, this will get worse and worse. Let's start simple though. Let's start with the just the inception of the film. So obviously, this comes from a book by L. Frank Baum, written in 1900. 1900, September the 1st. So it's 125 years old, Chris, this book. And obviously, it was called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and it was a big hit. It actually inspired a musical with different music, not the music we know from this movie, in 1902. So it just took 2 years for this to become a musical. That's how much people were like, there's a musical in that. Like, instant. He then wrote 13 more books. There were a few other attempts to adapt it over the years in full black and white, but they struggled. They weren't very popular, and obviously they made huge changes for budgetary and like practical reasons to make the story way less fantastical. And this obviously hurt people's enjoyment of these products. But then Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs comes out in 1937, and it becomes clear that there is an appetite among audiences for fantasy, fairy tales, and children's stories. So in February 1938, MGM buys the rights for $75,000, which at the time I was like, that's a lot of money. And then I did the conversion, Chris. That's $1.7 million by today's standards. Wow. That's a lot of money to buy a rights to a book. It is,
yeah.
Obviously, well, it pales in comparison to, I think, what was it, 500 million that Amazon paid for Lord of the Rings? But I don't know, whatever. Anyway, 1.7 million is a lot of money, in my opinion. The first scripts that they then produced were actually a little counterintuitive, though, because they mostly toned the fantasy stuff down, like previous ones had done. The Scarecrow was a normal man so stupid that the only job he was good for was scaring the crows. The Tin Man had been a criminal so heartless that he was sentenced to being imprisoned in the tin suit, the torture of which had made him kinder over time. This is the earliest versions of these scripts they were looking at. They got rid of this. They didn't do this in the end. So as work continued, obviously huge numbers of treatments and drafts were developed. I will say there's a story that turned out, I believe not to be true. There's a story you will hear many times about how Disney were also simultaneously developing a Wizard of Oz story. And at one point there was discussions between MGM and Disney about joining forces to make the movie, sort of Mary Poppins style, where the real world stuff was shot by MGM and the stuff in Oz would be animated. And in the end, it just didn't work out, and Disney didn't end up making their version of it. This appears to be nonsense, from what I can tell. I found potential evidence that Disney attempted to purchase the rights to Oz, the original book, around the time MGM sealed that deal, the one I talked about earlier. I can't find any actual evidence that Disney and MGM were tempted to work together on this project. It's a lovely idea. It doesn't seem to have... I couldn't verify that story at all, but I thought I'd bring it up because it is interesting. So the script process for this was so chaotic that at one point there were 3 different writers working on 3 completely different versions of the script, unaware of each other, not working together at all, not working from the same base draft. Now, normally I'd attempt to track the full history of a script as chaotic as this, but there were just so many drafts, and it was so long ago, there's just not enough evidence to verify who wrote what when. What I do know is that Noel Langley's draft becomes the basis for the final film. It was much closer to the book, incorporated the songs that were simultaneously being written by Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg, and this had the core idea of how they were going to help audiences accept the fantasy elements, which is by making it a dream, which gives them, in their opinion at the time, the best of both worlds. They can completely commit to the bizarre visuals, the wonderful world of Oz, but also make it much more acceptable and grounded for a modern audience, or that modern at the time, by simply having it be all a dream at the end. It felt like a perfect solution. There were 2 other writers called Florence Ryerson and Edgar Allan Wolfe. Yeah, Wolf. It's 2 O's. That's weird. Who had submitted drafts previously that had been rejected. They got brought back in to touch up Langley's draft, and then finally Langley had one last pass of touch-ups before it was submitted on October the 8th, 1938. So, the script would also go on to be mildly revised throughout production by the directors. I did say directors plural. We're going to come to that. So, only Langley, Ryerson, and Wolfe were credited for the script in the end, but some of the other names involved: Irving Breacher, Herbert Fields, Arthur Feed, Yip Alberg, Samuel Haffenstein, Jack Minns, Sid Silvers, Richard Thorpe, George Cukor, and King Vidor. Look, some of these names are people who would ultimately come to work on the movie in other ways, but like, my God, what so many writers. So you can see why I didn't bother tracking the full history of that script.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, there's so much more depressing shit to talk about, so we want to make room for that. So let's talk about casting, Chris. There's not a huge amount to cover here. I managed to find another debunked common story about this, which is that Shirley Temple was in the running to play Dorothy. She was one of 3 actresses. Also, there was a Deanna Durbin, and then obviously Judy Garland, who at the time was a relative newcomer, although she was becoming known for her voice. She was sort of famous for being a good singer. So, initial negotiations are reported to have started across all 3 actresses. Now, the story goes that they wanted Shirley Temple, but she was under contract with Fox, because back in the day, this is the old studio system where actors, directors, writers, they were under contract with a specific film studio and only generally worked for them, but could be loaned out under certain negotiations. So the story goes that Fox and MGM were going to do a swap for Shirley Temple. There was an actress that MGM had, and they were going to let Fox use her, and they were going to get Shirley Temple in replacement. The story is that this deal fell through when that actress sadly passed away very young. But I looked into this. The actress died in 1937, about a year before this movie was being produced. I do not believe that is true. I do not believe that is remotely true. In fact, it actually looks like she may have passed away before they even had the rights to the book. So I don't believe that's accurate, which is another one of those common stories that goes around about this film that is not accurate at all. There's a few of those we'll get to as we go across this. So in the end, obviously, the role goes to Julie Garland. And of course, I wouldn't want to see anyone else in the role. So originally, an actress called Gail Sondergaard was cast as the Wicked Witch of the West. She withdrew from the role when it shifted, because originally they were sort of matching Snow White's impression of the witch, because obviously Snow White had been sort of the impetus. The success of Snow White had been the impetus for this film even being made in the first place, and they were going for a sort of maybe a little older than our protagonist, but still a very sort of sleek and sleek's the wrong word, like a dolphin. They were going for a sort of like a good-looking sort of witch, sort of sultry, sort of glamorous depiction of a witch. But when they decided we're actually going to go more traditional and sort of meet the sort of ugly hag stereotype, that actress dropped out because she didn't want to do that, which is fair enough. But apparently this was just a few days before production was due to start. Now, Margaret Hamilton, who ultimately played the witch, she was one of those actors I was talking about that was just under contract with MGM. So they just were like, well, it's her then, because there's no negotiation that can happen. We just tell her she's working on this movie. So Margaret Hamilton gets told she's working on The Wizard of Oz. And she's actually thrilled because she's a huge fan of the books. In fact, she's described as a lifelong fan of the books. So when her agent called her to tell her she was going to be in the movie, she was like, oh, for which role? And the agent apparently famously just replied, the witch. Who else? Which is mean, but very funny. So a couple of people were offered the role of the wizard, and it didn't work out. So there was a guy called Ed Wynn. He turned it down because he thought the role was too small. There was a guy called W.C. Fields was also offered the role, but he wanted more money than the studio was willing to part with. There was a guy called Wallace Beery who wanted the role. He actually campaigned for the role, but basically he wanted a reduced schedule. So it was like, I want the role, but I don't want to do 6 months of shooting. If you could spread me out or something. So they were like, no, that didn't work out. So of course, in the end, Frank Morgan was given the role. Another MGM sort of contracted guy, but yeah, he does a great job. Now, very quickly, the start of it gets worse. So the Munchkins are portrayed by a group, and I'm going to name the group because that was their name, but obviously with the caveat that this is no longer an acceptable word to use. The group that played the Munchkins were called the Singer Midgets. Now, funnily enough, they were not named the Singer Midgets because of musical ability, but they were started by their manager, Leo Singer, which I think probably led to some confusion. Now, the troupe came from Europe, and a huge number of them were Jewish. And the writing was on the wall. While the Nazi Party, I don't believe, had started invading everyone yet, the writing was on the wall about their feelings on Jewish people in Europe. So they jumped at the opportunity to go to the US through appearing in this film. So that is why they took the job. And obviously, finding a group of small people who are trained performers where there was like enough of them, because they needed hundreds of performers to play the Munchkins. If I'm being honest, MGM probably didn't have a lot of options for that. So they took this group. None of them, again, were singers, and a lot of them couldn't speak English as well. So only 2 are actually heard speaking with their real-life voices, the ones who give Dorothy flowers as she climbs into the carriage. All of the others are overdubbed, including the singing, by American performers. So their voices are not their voices. But look, any excuse to get anyone away from the Nazi Party, I think that's a good thing. I think that's, it's a bit of a strange one, but I'm not gonna. That seems to have worked out, so I'm okay. It's an odd one.
Yeah, the end goal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I look from that was one of those everyone wins situations. MGM were not likely to find another group of trained performers with that number of smaller people in the roles. Oh, and if anyone's wondering why we haven't discussed the potential problematic use in Hollywood of smaller people in fantasy and mythical stuff. I'm not touching that topic. Look, one, I'm not qualified enough to have thoughts on that too much, and two, I know there's a lot of back and forth debate even amongst that community about what's acceptable. I know, for example, Peter Dinklage was very outspoken when they announced the recent Snow White remake that they shouldn't use smaller people in those roles. But I also have seen other performers from that community say essentially, fuck Peter Dinklage. He just cost. I think I saw one guy say that he just cost our guys, 7 roles in Hollywood. So look, I don't know enough about that debate to feel confident to pass judgment on it. So do your own research. In the 30s, getting those guys out of an increasingly Nazi-controlled Europe is probably a great idea. So I'm okay with it. So there you go. That's as far as I'm going to go on that topic, to be honest with you. So moving on from the Munchkins, Ray Bolger, who played the Scarecrow in the film, actually was originally cast as the Tin Man. So him and a guy called Buddy Ebsen were going to be playing.
I can't imagine that the other way around.
No, and we ended up not even getting the rotation because of what happened. We'll come to that in a second. But basically, there were two guys, Buddy Ebsen and Ray Bolger. Buddy Ebsen was cast as the Scarecrow. Bolger was cast as the Tin Man. Bolger, though, his childhood hero was an actor called Fred Stone. Now, Fred Stone, if you remember, I mentioned earlier that this book had already been adapted into a musical in 1902, like 2 years after it was written. Fred Stone had played the Scarecrow in that, and he was Roy Bolger's idol. He was the reason he got into performing. He was the inspiration for his own sort of vaudevillian work. So when Bolger gets cast as the Tin Man, he's not happy about that. Apparently he claimed, I'm not a tin performer, I'm fluid. Which is very progressive for the 30s. So Bolger had quite a powerful agent in Hollywood. And he leveraged the producers into a swap. So Ebsen now becomes the Tin Man, and Bolger becomes the Scarecrow, as he wanted. Now, I'm not going to pass judgment on that. Maybe everyone was happy with that situation. Maybe Ebsen didn't care. I don't know. But what I do know is it didn't work out very well for Ebsen ultimately, and we're going to come back to that in a second, because you may be thinking, oh, I don't recognise that name. Yeah, he doesn't end up in the movie, and we'll talk about that in a second. So Richard Thorpe gets hired as the director, and the film begins production in October 1938. Now, to say this production was troubled is an understatement, and passing through all the stories and finding a logical way to tell that all has proven very challenging. But let us start with that Buddy Ebsen story, because it is relevant to how this movie's production begins. So basically, as we discussed, he got cast as the Scarecrow, moved to the Tin Man. Several tests were done to find the right makeup effect, and they settled on an aluminum powder to give him a sort of sparkly look, which looked good, but it turns out was extremely toxic. So after just 10 days of production, he had a severe reaction, was suddenly unable to breathe. Because basically what was happening was they were reapplying this aluminum dust across the day, and he kept breathing it in, and it would go into his lungs, blocking up the various pores that, I don't know how lungs work clearly, but whatever's in your lungs that air passes through and is converted into, usable oxygen, was blocked completely by these aluminum, dust. And ultimately, according to his daughter in a 2023 interview with Fox News, he recalled to her that he tried taking a breath one evening and nothing happened. He simply couldn't take air into his system. He was hospitalized, critical condition, spent weeks on oxygen, and ultimately left the project. And he was so he was pushed out of his original role, then got sick and was forced to leave the film altogether because he was suddenly the Tin Man, and that went horribly wrong. Now, very quickly, because I desperately was looking for positive things while doing this trivia, he ultimately had a very good career in life. He was in Beverly Hillbillies, Breakfast at Tiffany's. He had a great career, was very beloved, and he actually lived to 95 years of age. So,
oh wow!
So
fair play.
So let's take a win, because there aren't many of those in this trivia. Passed away in 2003, 95 years old. What a life! very happy that's how that worked out. So, they lost the actor playing the Tin Man, and things only got worse for that, because producers felt that the director, Richard Thorpe, was rushing production. So after reviewing the footage, they felt that this was having a negative effect on the actor's performances, that he was trying to rush through it. So during this early portion of production, they'd also made the weird choice to have Garland wear a blonde wig. And she was wearing this sort of like heavy baby doll makeup, and she was playing Dorothy in this really sort of exaggerated manner. So unhappy with how things were progressing, the studio let Thorpe go. So that's director number 1 out the door. And a little teaser, guys, there's 5 of these fuckers. Then comes number 2, George Cukor, who was under MGM contract. Now, he couldn't do the full movie, and they knew that when they brought him in. In fact, he never ends up shooting a frame of footage. Basically, he oversees the production during the transition because he's actually about to go off and shoot Gone with the Wind. So he's busy, right? Pre-production is soon to begin on that. But they need someone to stand in and right the ship sort of from a creative perspective while they search for a new director. So he's sort of listed as more of a creative advisor, and whether you count him as a full director on this movie or not is up to you. Only one man ends up getting the credit for directing this movie, and he does direct the bulk of it. So we'll come back to him in a second. But yeah, Cukor didn't shoot any footage, but his biggest contribution was adjusting Dorothy. So he let her have her natural hair, subtler makeup, and told her just to be herself. He also made changes to the look of the Wicked Witch, and his final big influence on the movie, he cast our replacement Tin Man, who is Jack Haley, who ultimately is our Tin Man for the final film. So Cukor has a... Sorry, I couldn't resist. His name sounds like a bird call. I'm sorry. It's just what it sounds like. But he ultimately then leaves production because they bring in Victor Fleming, who assumes directorial role in November, and production cracks on. Now, he chooses to follow through with the creative retooling that Cukor brought into place. So he sticks with the new look for Dorothy, the new subtler approach to Dorothy. He likes the new approach to the witch, and he's happy with Jack Haley as the Tin Man, and production begins. So this is a new segment of our podcast called This Production Was a Dangerous, Disgusting Mess, and Everyone Involved Should Be Ashamed. On top of the tin...
It's concise. It's it's not as concise as Triv It Up, but, it's close.
Well, it gets worse. On top of the Tin Man story, which I separated because obviously that was part of the director's changing hands, a bunch of other horrible and dangerous shit happened on this production. So first of all, the entire movie was shot on sound stages where the environment could be better controlled, but the production was in Technicolor. And that was relatively new, and the extra elements that puts on productions were just the cast and crew weren't used to it. So there was longer days. They had to use brighter lights, heated the set to 38 degrees, which is 100 Fahrenheit for all you weirdos out there. But they also had to have more detailed costumes and sets, and obviously there was an eye-watering $225,000 electric bill, which is the equivalent to $5 million in today's money. This movie used $5 million of electricity because of this. And as I mentioned, longer days, starting at 4 a.m. and wrapping at 7 p.m. for 6 days a week. 6 days a week for 6 months. Now, thankfully, and a small bit of good news amongst this, Judy Garland was still under child labour laws. Christ. And only worked 4 on-set hours a day, which does not include makeup and hair and all that stuff, unfortunately, so she probably did about 5 or 6, and then 3 hours a day of education. So she wasn't working quite as long hours as everyone else. But that's not going to feel like much of a consolation when we hear more about her a little bit later, but we'll come to that. Now, Margaret Hamilton's copper-based makeup that made her green was easy to smudge and ruin. So she was on a liquid diet during production because she couldn't eat solid foods without ruining her makeup. But it gets worse, because it always does in this trivia. When the Wicked Witch exits from Munchkinland, there was a concealed elevator that lowered her below the stage, and there was smoke and fire designed to cover her exit. Now, the first take went well and is the take that is in the movie. She spins round, puff of smoke, big flame, she's gone. Brilliant effect. We all applaud. But they wanted to do a second take, which she was concerned about doing, but they did anyway. And, of course, the burst of fire came too soon. The copper-based paint they were using to make her green caught fire and gave her third-degree burns on her hands and face. Usually the paint had been removed with acetone, due to its toxic copper content, but because of the burns, it had to be removed with alcohol to prevent infection on this occasion, which apparently was extremely painful. She then spent 3 months recuperating before she could return to work. Now, the addendum to this story, Chris, is that she then said, "I refuse to do any more work with fire on this production." Very fair. So there's a stunt later in the movie where the witch is on a broom that's smoking. It's putting smoke out, which she refused to do. She said, "That's too close to fire for my liking." And it turned out she was right, because the thing sort of exploded and injured the stunt actress stand-in. So maybe we listen to Margaret Hamilton when she says something's not safe.
Yeah.
Now, it gets worse. It just keeps getting worse. The Cowardly Lion's costume was made from real lion skin fur. It weighed about 90 pounds, and due to the set already being extremely hot, as I talked about, he would sweat so profusely that the costume would be soaked by the end of the day. There were 2 people whose sole job it was to spend the night drying that costume for the next day of production. It got dry cleaned occasionally, but in the words of the crew members, it reeked. So he was in a big, heavy, very smelly costume the entire production. And due to the heavy makeup, Burt Layer, who played the lion, was another cast member who was initially only able to consume soup and milkshakes, liquid foods, on break, so not to disturb it, which eventually made him very sick. So after a few months, he put his foot down and requested he would have normal meals and that they would just have to deal with doing the makeup again after lunch. Which is correct.
Seems reasonable. Yeah,
correct. And it's a shame. It's a shame Margaret Hamilton didn't request the same thing. It doesn't sound like she got that privilege in the end. So yeah. Now, the scarecrow face makeup that Ray Bolger wore consisted in part of a rubber prosthetic with a woven pattern to create the effect of a burlap cloth. By the time the film was finished, the prosthetic had left a pattern of lines on his face that took more than 1 year to vanish.
Jeez.
The worst part, Chris, is that because the woven burlap pattern was not visible to audiences until a recent transfer of the film to 4K because of the definition of the film. No one could even see it, Chris.
Oh, that's mad. Oh.
It gets worse. During the haunted forest scene, several actors playing wind monkeys were injured when a piano wire suspending them snapped, dropping them several feet to the floor of the soundstage. Yay. It gets worse. You know the fake snow, Chris, in the scene when the poppies make them fall asleep?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pure asbestos. It's pure asbestos. It's just asbestos. They just
what?
They just poured asbestos on them for hours at a time.
Oh my god!
Now that one, I unfortunately have to give them a pass on. We did not know what asbestos was at this time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We just didn't. But fucking hell, that's bad. I shouldn't be laughing. I'm laughing out of horror.
Did any of them get asbestosis?
And I'm actually unclear on that. I tried finding this out. A few of them did die suspiciously young, in my opinion, but it's unclear. Because the problem with asbestosis is, and the reason that businesses who have buildings with asbestos in them now have to keep very thorough records, is because asbestosis may not turn up for like 30, 40 years after you've inhaled it. So I worked in a building for several years with asbestos. It may be another 10, 20 years before I even notice the effects of that. So unclear, I would say, is the answer. But yeah, just shredded asbestos. Just dumped on the actors. Again, they didn't know. That's the only one of these I give them a pass on. Well, no one knew.
Yeah, and you know, asbestos, you know, this is particularly relevant, I guess, in your case. Asbestos is most harmful and in some ways only really harmful when disturbed and when moved and when broken. So shredded asbestos is particularly for not just the cast, obviously, But also the crew and anyone that was on that set.
It's so insane. It's like, but it's again, they didn't know, but it is the most insane thing. Yeah. They didn't know. I have to keep saying that they didn't know. No one did. It was wonder material. Asbestos was used in so many buildings because it was magic. It was deeply cheap, easy to reproduce, didn't have a huge environmental impact, and was fire resistant. And it was strong. Like, that was magic. If you've got a material that's strong and fire resistant and cheap, like, well, of course they put it in fucking everything. Like, why wouldn't they? So yeah. Anyway, different story, but like, my god, yeah. Yeah. All right. So it doesn't end there. It gets worse. Let's talk about Judy Garland's time on set, because I can only describe the stuff I'm about to say as abuse, and. It's not fun to read about, and it's not fun to talk about, but it is a huge part of, this film's history. So yeah, some horrendous stories have emerged in the subsequent years about Judy Garland's time on set. First, the studios went to large lengths to change her appearance. The character as written was 12, and Judy Garland at this point was 16. One of the reasons they'd originally given her the sort of baby doll makeup was an attempt to make her look younger. The look they finally settled on involved a system that binded her chest down to make her look younger in her physique, which apparently was extremely uncomfortable. She also wore false teeth that fit over her own because they were deemed misaligned. And she had rubber discs up in each nostril to change the shape of her nose. She would actually wear these for 5 more years until a makeup artist on Meet Me in St. Louis threw them in a drawer after Judy had said, I'm supposed to wear these. That makeup artist, who is my hero, is called Dorothy Ponadell. I just thought I'd name her because... what a hero. Also called Dorothy. Kind of a small coincidence there. But it gets worse, unfortunately, as it often does with this trivia. They were also giving her Benzedrine tablets to keep her weight down. They were also giving her uppers and downers to control her mood. This concoction of drugs, combined with the heat and the long hours, often left her delirious on set and having giggling fits. During the lion's introduction scene, she giggled so much at his performance that Victor Fleming, the director, lost his temper and slapped her.
Fucking hell.
Now, if you watch the scene now, you can actually see her start to slightly smile when he approaches her, the lion, and she pulls up Toto towards her mouth to sort of cover it. So she, even in the final shot, the giggling is visible. Now, apparently, and this does not relieve him of any responsibility here, but Victor Fleming apparently did feel absolutely dreadful about slapping her and said that a member of the crew should punch him in the nose for what he'd done. She overheard this, and because she's a fucking darling at this point, before Hollywood ruined her, because she has her own, let's say, history, she went over and kissed him on the nose instead as a way of sort of saying she forgave him. Which, God, I don't know, man.
She was, to clarify here, she was giggling because of tablets they were giving her.
Correct. Yeah? Correct.
Fucking hell.
Correct. That wasn't all. Unfortunately, reports suggest that various members of the cast were constantly sort of pointing out her breasts and the fact they were covering them up and making other lewd comments. Several memoirs have mentioned that actors playing the Munchkins propositioned and pinched her. Later, Garland herself would say that she was groped by the studio head, Louis B. Mayer, an all-round piece of shit. He was the head of MGM at the time. So look, to top off the Judy Garland section of this, she was deeply mistreated in this movie. That is nothing but abuse. And once again, everyone who made this film should be deeply ashamed of themselves for both the injury they caused to all those various people, the neglect that occurred, and particularly their treatment of Judy Garland. which is just despicable. And look, we have noted doing this podcast that the further back in time the film is, the worse safety is, and the more of these stories there are. We had several stories from Greece, for example, which is from the 70s, I think, that's like, but were also awful. Like the lady with the ectopic pregnancy that worked through it because they just assumed she was having lady problems. That's a serious medical emergency. So, things have gotten better, and that is good. The modern films, we very rarely have stories like this unless they're proper, like, no one could have seen it coming accidents, or they're just very rare. But that will never forgive the treatment. I mean, the accidents are one thing, piano wires snapping, things like that, we've learned. You know what I mean? No one wanted to hurt the people playing the flying monkeys. That was an actual accident, as a lack of knowledge and safety that studios and film productions have developed over time. F1, people were dying in that sport regularly until the 90s. Things learn, safety measures get better. I'm not saying that forgives those. What will never, I think, be acceptable or forgiven is the treatment of Judy Garland on this movie. It was just absolutely horrendous, because that's choices. They chose to give her the drugs. They chose to make lewd comments. They chose to. That was people being horrendous.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry that happened to anyone. Yeah, awful. Absolutely awful.
That's mad.
Especially for a film that brings so much joy to so many, hearing this stuff was really hard. I had a depressing Wednesday going through all this, if I'm being honest with you.
Wow. God.
Now, you'll remember earlier, Chris, I mentioned there were 5 directors, but we've only mentioned 3 so far. So let's talk about our last bout of, just to get us out of that depressing section of this podcast, to the final segment of director musical chairs. So do you remember George Cukor, who only looked after the film for a couple of weeks because he was going to go make Gone with the Wind? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Well, they didn't like his work on Gone with the Wind, and they fired him from it. So they took Victor Fleming, who was making Wizard of Oz, and put him on it instead. So Victor Fleming ends up directing Gone with the Wind also. Now, I do want to point out that it is incredible that Victor Fleming directed Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind in the same year. I mean, what a CV that man ended up having. Like, imagine that.
That's kind of mad.
Both films up for like best film Oscar that year. I think Gone with the Wind won it. I mean, but imagine having 2 films in best film at the Oscars. Like, it's incredible.
That's crazy.
Poor George Cukor gets booted off the movie he gave up this one to go do, and then they take Victor Fleming off this movie where there's still, I think what is it? Let me see how many days. There were 10 days left of shooting, and they're like, "No, we need you on Gone with the Wind. You don't get to finish this movie." So they bring in, one second, but once principal photography concluded, Victor Fleming was called away, and veteran director King Vidor took over for the final 10 days of this production, which included the bulk of the Kansas scenes. So Garland's iconic performance in Over the Rainbow was not directed by the man who directed this movie, in terms of credits, and was directed by King Vidor. Now, there were a few months of other shoots and pickups that then happen afterwards. They do some reshoots and stuff in April, May, and June. These were actually just helmed by the film's producer, Mervyn Leroy. So Mervyn Leroy, King Vidor, Victor Fleming, George Cukor, and then who was the first guy? Oh, God, so long ago. Richard Thorpe. All ultimately directed parts or all of this movie. Whatever. It's just mad.
Yeah, that's crazy.
All right, so let's power through to the we're on the home stretch now. So test screenings began in June, and obviously early cuts of the movie were 2 hours long, as we already discussed, which was just way too long for a film of this era. Fleming, who was now finished with Gone with the Wind when they were editing it, and Leroy, the producer, agreed they needed to cut at least 15 minutes. Among the cuts were obviously the Scarecrow's dance number, which I already talked about, a swing song called Jitterbug, which went alongside their journey to the witch's castle, and a Hail, Hail, the Witch is Dead, which was, I assume, a reprieve of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. That was sung upon returning to Emerald City after defeating the witch. And there was also, as I mentioned, a reprise of Over the Rainbow. These were all cut, and a lot of them are from the final act of the movie, with the exception of the Scarecrow. And that actually ends up sort of solving a lot of the movie's apparent pacing problems, because obviously that means that once we get to the action of the end of the movie, there are no songs interrupting it. We're just powering straight through. Now, MGM also almost cut Over the Rainbow. Okay.
That's insane.
So they...
yeah, it's. I mean, because that isn't a song, and obviously, look, that song's had a lot of, it has become a key part of culture, and actually had even, I'd argue, a song that didn't need a reprise, had it with Eva Cassidy's version, but. You don't need to have that song embedded into your life to hear it and know that it's beautiful and a classic. Like that's an instant. Oh, this song's amazing! That's insane that they would ever think of cutting it.
It's beautifully sung. It's poignant. It's a huge element of the story of the film and the character of the film. Without it, I'm really not sure what's left of Dorothy's arc. It's so pivotal to the movie. Now, I will say, to their credit, Leroy and Fleming, so the producer who directed the reshoots, and Fleming, the guy that directed most of the movie, fought very hard to keep it and won, and were immediately vindicated because the song won Best Song at the Academy Awards. So they were obviously right. The studio were insane. Now, the studio's logic, if you're wondering, because it just seems really arbitrary, cut one of the best songs in the fucking movie, most poignant moments of the movie. They were worried the Kansas sequence was too long and that children and audiences might get bored waiting for Oz, essentially. I do sort of see what they're getting at, but it's not a problem. It's really not a problem. I was surprised that I wasn't itching to get to Oz, because I think those Kansas scenes are actually really well shot. I think they're really interesting to look at because of the sepia. I think the acting is still really good. I think the dialogue is still really sharp. And I think what's happening is quite engaging. So I didn't find myself wondering, when are we going to Oz? Like, those scenes are good enough to entertain you that you never notice how long it is before you're in Oz. So it was an irrelevant. They were trying to solve a problem that I don't think is there, in my opinion. So yeah, they did also trim out.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So they did also trim out some stuff that they thought were too intense and scary for children. So they deleted shots showing the tornado enveloping the farmhouse entirely, and they also cut a lot of the Wicked Witch of the West's performance, because they either trimmed or deleted it entirely because they thought she was too frightening for children, basically. And this actually kind of proved true, because for years, Margaret Hamilton, who was the sweetest woman by all accounts, struggled with the fact that children were very scared of her. So she actually ended up going on Mr. Rogers to sort of, not in makeup, to sort of explain, well, I was just acting and I'm actually a nice lady, which is really sweet. And she does seem lovely. Apparently Judy Garland actually found it difficult to be afraid of Margaret Hamilton because she was so nice. And despite the fact that she was playing her adversary, they actually got along really well. In fact, there's a really funny story that Garland went in and showed off Hamilton a dress that she was going to wear on stage for her high school graduation. And the studio head, the guy that actually Garland would later accuse, let's be honest, who groped Garland, Louis B. Mayer, piece of shit, he then sent her on a tour with Mickey Rooney to promote something, and she never actually got a chance to wear that dress on stage with her classmates. And Hamilton, the Wicked Witch, she was so angry, she called the studio head and yelled at him. So good for her. Absolutely stand up for that fucking abused child. Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. I will also, we didn't actually discuss that, but the notion, it is not too scary. We didn't talk about this, but I think actually, whether those specific cuts were right to remove or not, I don't know. But the movie does do that well. I think it is. There are horror elements. There's a witch. There are things that could make people like, oh, but kids like a little scared. But it's not. It isn't actually too far. I think the line it toes. I just realised as you were talking about,
Yeah, no, we never covered this. No,
piece
please.
of triv. The line that the film toes on that is actually very strong and really good.
Yeah, I would agree. I would 100% agree. I think, and look, maybe that the studio were right there. Then maybe if they had, because I think it's like a good balance. Maybe if those scenes were left in the movie, would have maybe been left a bit too scary for kids. I'm not sure, but I agree with you. It's perfectly done. So like clearly they made the right decisions regarding that. So yeah, good stuff. Another dark myth around this film, which I'm going to debunk here. Because look, the history of this movie is fucking dark enough without inventing stuff. Can we just make that very clear? Right. If I've not already demonstrated that this movie's production was very tragic in many ways and horrible things happened amongst the production of this, we don't need to invent a person hanging themselves in the background of a shot. So, very quickly.
Oh, Jesus.
Yes, it's a myth. It's not real. I want to make this very clear. There's a myth because basically, okay, so what happened was, to make the world feel a bit more lived in, right? And this is bananas. They had crested cranes brought in. Birds. Giant birds. Crested cranes are huge. And they just let them wander around the background of the set. Because they thought it would make it feel more alive. Movie magic, okay? I think that's strange, but I'm okay with it. During the scene when they first meet the Tin Man, as they're marching off, singing "We're off to see the wizard," there's a shape in the background that, in lower definition, looked like a person hanging. The myth became one of the Munchkins had killed themselves on set, and that's what that was. Now, it's actually one of those cranes stretching its wings. Bizarre idea to have large birds hover in the background, but sure. Okay. I'm not going to criticize that. Now, for a while, they thought they'd gotten away with sort of debunking this conspiracy, because obviously the company in question have often, MGM have often been very clear, no, that's not what happened. But the conspiracy was prominent enough that for a little while, Warner Brothers, who ended up owning the movie, I can't remember if they just purchased MGM. No, MGM's gone to Amazon. I don't know what happened. Maybe they were just distributing the home video. They just edited the shape out. But that further pushed the myth.
Because I was going to say, that doesn't help.
Doesn't solve the problem at all. So eventually what happens in one of the more recent remastered versions, so there was the 1998 version where it was just gone, digitally just coloured out of the picture. Later on, they would edit it so the bird was coloured bright pink, so you could really tell it's a bird. Like, they changed the colour palette to make the shape more obvious. And then obviously we had higher definition as well, because we were transferring the movie to HD at a certain point. It allowed it to become very clearly a bird. I've seen the modern version of it. It's very clearly a bird. It was always a bird, but it was very clearly a bird. But this was further, once again, confusion caused in the 2000s when an unknown person put a clip of it on the internet where they had edited in the shape. They'd taken the absent version that Warner Brothers had put out and put a version in that specifically had a very clear shape of a person hanging. So while the legend persists, it is utterly false. It has always been false. It is not a thing. Everyone needs to stop with that, because the movie's dark enough. Thank you. Another depressing thing about me looking into this movie, Chris, was there was one piece of trivia I was really excited about getting to, because movie magic. But this is another one that ends up being debunked. But this is a good one, so I'm really sad about this. So according to a film historian called
Yeah, but I think for the sake of, let's have them both debunked.
absolutely.
For the sake of that last one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people need to continue to debunk that last one. That was important. But this one, I'm just sad about because I liked this trivia, and I knew this trivia before watching the movie. And when I found out it wasn't real, I was very sad. So, according to a film historian called Algene Harmitz, the coat worn by Morgan as the not the wizard, but as Professor Marvel, was purchased from a second-hand shop. The wizard might wear the same coat, actually, looking at it. But there was a whole rack purchased, and the actor, Morgan, had chosen the one to wear. And at some point during production, he found a label in the coat indicating it had belonged to L. Frank Baum himself. And at the time, the historian checked in with his widow, who confirmed this, apparently. And then the coat was ultimately represented to her. However, Algene Harmitz's account has been debunked because a Baum biographer called Michael Patrick Heim spoke to the Baum family, and they deny ever receiving, seeing a coat, knowing of the story at all. They, as far as they're aware, that is absolute nonsense. And Margaret Hamilton was asked about this, and she believes that it was a rumor concocted by the studio at the time as viral marketing, early viral marketing.
Wow,
that makes me sad.
Yeah, that is a shame.
Because I love that. Isn't that delightful as a piece of trivia? I'm going to continue to think that's real. No, I can't just take the good.
It is also a mad example of like early viral marketing, isn't it?
Yeah, it sort of is. Like concocting a rumor to make to make movie magic. This movie is so linked to the original movie that the coat of the original author found its way to the wizard. It's a lovely story. Anyway, it's better. It's if only they put that sort of writing thought into the script. No, I'm kidding. So I haven't done a huge amount of research. One thing we would have done if the trivia for this movie was shorter, like didn't have a lot of if the movie's production didn't have a lot of backstory, I might have taken some time to go into the differences between the book and the film. As it turns out, this movie's production was bananas, so I didn't do a lot of that. But there are a couple of small things I'd like to mention. There's a little nod to the book when Glinda gives Dorothy a little kiss on the forehead. That happens in the movie. But it's in the book with a specific purpose. In the book, that kiss protects her from the Wicked Witch. And it's the reason the Wicked Witch can't harm Dorothy, because no harm can come to someone who bears the kiss of the Good Witch. So that's a little nod to it without them actually explicitly stating it.
I think that would have been better than the shoes just, somehow magic.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but the witch's motivations in this movie are strange. She wants those shoes back. I mean, look, Dorothy killed her sister, I get that, but the shoes thing is weird. It's weird. So in the original book, the wizard gives Dorothy and her companions different gifts. They're quite funny, actually, so I noted them down. The Scarecrow gets bran with nails and pins poured into his head. So he has brand new brains.
Oh my god. Okay, well, I'm glad they changed that.
Well, they were also sharp, Chris, you see.
Now I've changed my mind. Now I think it's clever.
The Cowardly Lion was given a bowl of a mysterious liquid which the wizard said wouldn't be courage until it was consumed. Obviously, liquid courage is a slang for alcohol. So he gives the lion booze in the book. And the Tin Man in the book gets a plush heart rather than the clock. The idea being that it makes the hard tin object soft. Plush heart. Stuffed heart.
That one's okay.
That one's fine.
That one's okay.
That's charming and sort of delightful in a weird sort of esoteric way. It's sort of strange but charming, I guess. Yeah, but they're weird. They're all weird. But to be fair, what he gives them in the movie is weird. So I don't know. We didn't talk about it, but the certificate to a fake university... The clock, so his heart ticks. The clock in the shape of a heart, so his heart ticks. What does he give to the lion? I can't even remember. What does he give to the lion? I don't remember.
He
I literally
something
watched this
to do
movie.
with what? Yeah, brave. Well, it's courage somehow. What does he give the line?
What does the wizard give the line?
Oh, it's a medal. It's a medal. It's a
Oh,
medal for
Medal of Bravery.
his brave. Yeah,
Medal for bravery. God, Google needs to back off on this AI stuff, man. That automatically jumped into something new that I've never seen before called AI mode, which I've never seen, which just gave me an answer like completely through AI. No actual results.
You know what? I think that so I saw that this morning, and what they're doing, which I think is really mad, is it's now that if you go, so for example, if you go to images where you see at the top the different options with like news, videos, whatever, AI is the first one, and obviously I think that used to be all. So they're going to trick a lot of people into clicking it. Because they'll just assume, oh, that's all. I'll click that, which is presumably is exactly what you've just done.
But no, I didn't click anything. It just defaulted to it. I didn't click a thing. I typed in a search and hit enter, and that's what it gave me. Very disappointing. Anyway, look, let's back to the movie. Google can go fuck off with their AI shit. Yes, here we go. So the original ending was for the final shot to be the camera panning down to reveal Dorothy was still wearing ruby slippers. The studio believed the audiences were too sophisticated for that. And they were determined to keep it a dream. Obviously, in the books, Oz is very much a real place. This is just a weird production hiccup. So obviously, the Tin Man has sort of two versions of his costume in this. There's the shiny, pristine version of it post wash and brush up company scenes, which had already been shot, and then there was the sort of rusty state of disrepair that it's in the earlier parts of the movie. So they were filming scenes in the forest, and after 3 days they realized he was in the wrong version of the costume, so there was 3 days of production that were just lost because they had to do it again with him in the other version. Very funny. Contrary to popular belief, this was not the first film to use Technicolor. Technicolor was introduced actually in a rudimentary state in 1917, several years earlier, as a 2-color additive process. The 3-strip Technicolor process that's used in this movie debuted in a musical called The Cat and the Fiddle in 1934, and the first feature film to use it, feature-length film to use it, was a 1935 film called Becky Sharp. That was entirely shot in Technicolor. So yeah, people often think this is the first Technicolor film, but it wasn't quite. One of the first. This is a funny one. The yellow brick road they built was coming up green in the original when they were first shooting it. They couldn't work out why. It's to do with the way Technicolor passes colors. They had to adjust the color of the road so that it looked yellow on camera. I'm not sure follow the green brick road really works, so I'm glad they fixed that.
Yeah, I think it was important to fix that, I think.
Yeah, because obviously Technicolor was still sort of experimental, and knowing how colours might look on camera was still working it out. So yeah, it ended up coming out green. I think that's kind of funny though. I'd love to see a footage of that. Also, apparently, there's no footage of the original Tin Man. You know, in the aluminum dust version of the costume. There's no footage of that at all, but there are pictures. It's interesting. I looked that up also, but I recommend people Google that. It's fun. The slippers in the book are not ruby; they are silver. And it was actually MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer and Horrendous Man and Groper, who I will continue to call out, even though he's probably long dead. A piece of shit, don't care. But he was the one who felt that making them ruby would actually be the right move for a movie in Technicolor. And I hate to say it, but I agree with him. Silver wouldn't have been as impressive in a Technicolor thing, even though it would have been book accurate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A weird little coincidence that was just at the bottom of my trivia. The day that Judy Garland died, there was an actual tornado in Kansas. It's a fun.
Oh, wow.
It's a funny world.
That does feel. Yeah, that feels poetic, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how to parse that. Other than just very strange, very very strange. With Galinda's glass ball, very quickly as well, I should mention, it took 2 weeks to get them to light the ball correctly so it would appear properly. Again, because of Technicolor compositing, was difficult and new. 2 weeks to light that glass ball so they could do her entrance. Bizarre. Not bizarre, just unfortunate. This movie went very over production budget and shot for way longer than it was supposed to. So there you go. All right, let's talk about box office. Box office, Chris. And there's a surprising amount of information about this too, because interestingly, Chris, this movie was not a hit on release. The numbers suggest that at least at first, the film didn't even quite break even. Yeah.
Jeez, so, I assumed it was fairly instant.
It became one, but it took a while. We'll talk briefly about that here. So the production cost ballooned to 2.7 million, which in today's money is 63 million, if we're adjusting for inflation. And its return was 3 million, which is 68 million in today's money. Which you might think, well, there you go. That's made its money back. That doesn't account for marketing costs or the split with exhibitors. So this movie did not initially break even. Now, I should note that some claim that it did actually do okay because of international releases. There's word that its box office returns in Great Britain, Scandinavia, Mexico, Brazil, and Australia were really strong. But there are no verifiable figures because records in the 30s of that sort of thing were simply not kept. So we do not know how much money the movie made in those countries. But I would say it's fair to say, at least initially, it underperformed. I think that is the fairest way to describe this movie. When they were hoping for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and that's why they made the movie, this didn't come anywhere near what Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs made. This was considered a bit of a disappointment.
That's mad.
Mm-hmm.
I would have assumed it was for it to be what it became. Mm-hmm. I would have assumed it came fairly out the gate.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the movie does ultimately rise to being very, very popular. But it does so 17 years later with the rise of an invention called television. So following the war, TVs became more popular in the US throughout the 50s. MGM sold CBS the rights to televise the film for $225,000, which is about $2 million in modern money, per broadcast. It was first shown on television on November the 3rd, 1956, and was a massive ratings success. It had a Nielsen rating of 33.9 and an audience share of 53%. It was then repeated in 1959 and gained an even larger audience on that repeat, a Nielsen rating of 36.5 and an audience share of 58. And it then, from that point on, pretty much became an annual television tradition. In fact, since 1956, Chris, there are only 6 years on record this movie did not air on US TV. 57, 58, 63, 92, 95, and 97.
Wow.
It was a
huge... I
huge...
wonder why it didn't air in those years, though.
Well, I
that's
think...
the wrong thing to take from
well,
that. But...
So 57 and 58 makes sense because it originally airs in 56. It's a huge hit. They must have just gone, well, that was a one-off. They then play it again in 59, and it's massive again, and they go, oh no, this will just keep being popular. So then so the first two I understand. I'm not sure if it was just weird luck that just it didn't get aired for whatever reason in 63, 92, 95, 97. Maybe 92, 95, 97 actually is around their cinema re-releases. There was a cinema re-release in, I think, 98. So I wonder if there was just an element of don't air it. It's going to come out in cinemas again soon. We're having a big re-release in 98 for its anniversary. So maybe that's why those ones were. But either way, the film is a huge hit on re-release and starts to see that it becomes a modern classic in that time. 17 years after its initial release. It doesn't actually get a UK television premiere until 1975, where it had an estimated audience.
Blimey.
An estimated audience of 20 million on Christmas Day on BBC One. Massive, absolutely massive audience. So it becomes impossible to calculate.
I've just looked up, sorry. It first came out on VHS in the US in 1980. Mm-hmm. So then I looked up when they were introduced, and apparently VHSs were introduced to the US in 77. So it came out quite early on VHS.
Precisely. And that's what makes this really tricky to say if this movie ultimately made money. I think it's safe to say it did make a huge amount of money ultimately, because at a certain point your production costs are long behind you and it just keeps printing money. VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, cinema re-releases. the TV deals we talked about, or even the first one earned them $2 million. The problem is all of these chunks of money come in over a huge period of time. So, for example, there's a 1998 re-release for one of the anniversaries that earns $14 million. And you go, well, there you go. You spent $2 million to make the movie. There's 14. You've turned a profit. $14 million in 1998 isn't the equivalent to the $2 million in 1935 because of inflation. So it becomes this absolute mad calculation that a better person than me will have to figure out, truthfully. Because the movie has a huge amount of TV success, a huge amount of home video success. But I literally have no idea whether I could call this movie profitable. Because it would have needed to make $65 million in today's money to be profitable. But re-releases have turned over. Like the 2019 re-release, for example, made $2 million. Which isn't a huge amount of money. The 2013 re-release made 5.7.
That's a fair amount, though, for a re-release of a movie that old that everyone has seen.
100%. But, $2 million in 2019 isn't scratching the surface of the essentially $65 million they spent to make it in 1935. So
nah, it adds up, though. I reckon it did.
My 100%. My conclusion is that while it is not possible to calculate, this has definitely turned a profit ultimately, even if it is difficult to figure out how. I will say, by the way, when looking into this, that 2013 re-release was in 3D and it made $5.7 million. Who went and saw this movie in 3 fucking D, right? What's wrong with you people? Speaking of bizarre re-releases...
I saw the Titanic re-release in 3D.
Oh dear. No, I'm sorry for your loss. Bizarrely on the topic of re-releases of this movie in strange formats, I'm not sure if you're aware, Chris, but as we speak and as we're recording this back in August, it is August the 1st for listeners hearing this in November. They are currently airing Wizard of Oz in the Sphere in Las Vegas with an AI-generated screen extension. Now, this has been very controversial, but look, you're seeing it in the Sphere. No one's acting like this is how the movie should be presented. The movie still exists as a movie. You're putting it in a new format, so they've used AI to make the images larger, the backgrounds go further, so they can wrap around in the Sphere while keeping the characters center of frame. I've seen some screenshots of it. I think it looks fucking awful, but who am I to judge? Whatever. Apparently also the AI is smudged all the details of people's faces and stuff, because that's just what fucking AI does when it tries to upscale things. So apparently it doesn't look great. But if you're into seeing if you like the Wizard of Oz, you want a weird way of seeing it, see it all surrounding you where you feel really immersed in it, fine. Let the people have their fun. If you're gonna go to Vegas and pay a bunch of money to see Wizard of Oz, that's your business. I don't care. But yeah, this movie is going to live forever, and that's actually an interesting point, because Ray Bolger, who played the Scarecrow, was asked at a certain point later in his career if he ever received residuals or compensation for all of the TV showings of this film, and this is before home video, and he replied, no, just immortality.
Oh wow. Which is, true.
Incredible.
That's a great way of looking at it.
Absolutely incredible, and what a wise man. So to sort of summarize, we don't need to summarize. I've got two tiny things to cover. MGM did consider reuniting the original cast for a sequel a couple of years later, but plans never got past the development stage for a few reasons. One, obviously, the movie had gone over budget, overproduction, had been a nightmare, and it hadn't made its money back. But also, Judy Garland had become a major star and would be massively expensive, and Margaret Hamilton had expressed hesitation at reprising the role. So yeah, it just never happened. The closest the movie ever got to a sequel was actually made by Disney in the 80s, and it's called Return to Oz, and apparently it was fuel for many, many children's nightmares. A lot of people describe being traumatized by that movie as children. I never saw it, still haven't seen it. I saw The Wiz. I liked The Wiz. That was fun. Sort of a modern readaptation of the movie with the musical modernized and stuff. I like that. It's a good one. I have no idea if Return to Oz is any good, made by Disney. Literally no idea. That was a tricky movie though for Disney because obviously the rights were still with MGM, so they bought the rights to a sequel book, and they had to pay for certain elements, like to make the slippers ruby. They had to give MGM money because that's MGM's property.
Oh wow! Just don't. Just when it gets to that point, just don't bother. Sorry, don't.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
Yeah. I've heard mixed things about Return to Oz. I have no idea. Obviously, but it's continued to spawn in. Oz the Great and Powerful was a big movie that was made a few years back. Obviously, stage show Wicked, based on a book that was written that sort of recontextualizes the Wicked Witch. This will live forever in some form or another. This story, L. Frank Baum's work has clearly, stood the test of time. 125 years later, we're still releasing movies set in this world. And as Wicked for Good comes out later this year, from my perspective, I remain glad that this all exists because I'm a big fan of the Wicked. I enjoy the musical. I really liked that first movie. Good for them. Very quickly, Chris, then, before we wrap this up, we don't have cars exist, obviously, because there are no cars in this movie, Chris, but we do have carriages exist. Oh, excellent work. I didn't know what you were going to do. I thought maybe you'd make a horse clopping noise. That's so much better. So much better.
Thank you. No, I appreciate your support on that. Thank you.
So, there's a carriage in this movie pulled by the horse of different colours, you may remember. Which, by the way, they did the horse of different colours by putting like a gelatin on the horse. And then they actually had 4 horses because they didn't want to have to wash it off and reapply it for every shot where the horse changes colour. So they just brought in 4 horses, which aren't apparently even the same breed. So the horse looks drastically different physically between shots, but you're too busy marvelling at it changing colour to notice, I think. That it's a completely different looking horse, but they brought 4 horses in.
It's sad that that's true, isn't it? Because it is. Like, I watched the film, like, hey, the horse is a different colour. Cool, interested.
Yeah, you didn't notice it just was a completely different breed of horse. Looked completely different.
No, not a clue.
No, same with me. No, I had the same experience. So that's kind of cool. And apparently it was harmless. The gelatin they used, and I think it was non-toxic. They treated the horses better than they treated the actors, it turns out.
I was going to say, it was nice to know. It's nice to know some creatures were treated with respect on the making of this movie,
and covered in a substance that was non-toxic. So they did know that existed. Anyway, so the carriage, specifically the carriage that was drawn by this horse, like pulled by this horse, was originally made for Abraham Lincoln and given to him as a gift during the Civil War. It has a handwritten note on its frame that reads, A. Lincoln, June 8th, 1864. Now, this carriage ended up becoming famous for other reasons in that it became a little celebrity. It's a little celebrity carriage, Chris. This carriage appeared in nearly 200 films before it became part of the collection at the Judy Garland Museum. So carriages exist, everyone. And we've done it.
Wow. It's okay. I'm just find myself wondering what else is in the Judy Garland Museum. Like, is that still open?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would bet the sort of thing they would have would be like the dress, maybe the slippers, But let's have a look.
Yeah, you'd assume.
It appears to be still open. It's got a website, Chris. It's got tons of Wizard of Oz memorabilia. Oh man, they're here in the museum hours. They're closed on the 4th of July. But they do 9 to 5 every day. But you've got to enter. Your last admission is 4:30, Chris. So it still seems to be up and running.
Yeah, fair enough.
Oh, so it looks quite small. It's a house. I wonder if this is like a house she lived in or something. But I don't know what's in it. Yeah, they've got the slippers. They have got the slippers. A statewide effort to purchase the slippers.
You need the slippers, don't you? If you're going to do it, you need the slippers.
Yeah. They've got those. It was a big deal when they got those. That's where you'd go to see those. But other stuff there as well, presumably in the carriage. And all right, cool. Well, there you go. We learned something new. So, Chris, with Wizard of Oz firmly behind us, and I am sorry for the length of that trivia. That was one of the longest. It was my notes were over 4,000 words long, so I knew we were in trouble. I knew we were in trouble.
Dan messaged me yesterday and was like, "Do you have a hard out?" And I was like, "Yeah." and this time, and then I was like, do you need to? I thought maybe he had a commitment to get to. And I was like, do you need us to reschedule? And he was like, no, it's just the trivia's the trivia's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, having heard it all now, Chris, like you agree, right? It's insane.
Yeah, it's ridiculous and depressing. So yeah. Thanks.
And also, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Look,
Thank you for your hard work.
if I'm going to be burdened with 7 hours of research that make me read through all this shit, you can be burdened with all this shit. No, I feel like
no. Thank you for. I mean it. Thank you for your hard work.
I will say very quickly that I knew that the Tin Man got sick because the paint wasn't right, and I knew that Judy Garland had been on chemicals and. There were several things I knew already going in about this film, so I did know I was getting myself. I put a day aside because I knew I didn't know how bad it was going to get, but I was aware this production was troubled, and I knew that there was going to be a lot when I chose it. So I didn't. This wasn't one of those really unfortunate ones where I pick a film and I'm like, la-di-da, this will be a nice easy trivia, and then I open up the Wikipedia page and I'm like, holy fuck. This was not a surprise. I knew what I was getting into. So that leaves us with a big question, Chris, of where we're going next. I'm excited to find out.
So, yeah, and I think you'll be excited about the choice actually, because I'm pretty sure you've seen the film. So basically, what happens is I'm chatting to a friend yesterday who I work with, and I go right, I better go because I've got to go watch The Wizard of Oz. And they're like, what the fuck? Why have you got to go watch The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah, because you didn't say I'm going to watch it. You said I've got to.
yeah. Which is accurate. I didn't mean I didn't say it in a shitty way or anything.
No. But I'm saying that phrasing alone does raise questions, doesn't it? Because no one has to watch a movie ever.
So I'm like, well, for the same reason that I'm always watching the film when I say something like that for the podcast, because they'll hear me be like, right, I've got to go watch and then name a random film. But this particular friend, it's always a bugbear of theirs when I, not so much The Wizard of Oz, but I'll name a film and it's in their view not a classic. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, why are you you've got to watch Johnny English, have you? That kind of thing. So we have this discussion, and I go, well, okay, I'll tell you what, fine. You choose the next movie. This is sort of the brief. This is what the podcast is. Pick a film, and I'll choose that as my next film, and then I'll watch it. And he said, oh, well, it's always been crazy to me that you've never seen. And then he named a film, and he said, so I pick that. And I said, if we review that, will you actually listen to the podcast? And he said, yeah, if you're reviewing that, I'll listen. But he picked a film that he's correct. I've never seen, but he absolutely picked a film in this podcast's wheelhouse.
Do we are we allowed to give a first name for this person?
Oh yeah, I don't think he'd mind. That's Matt.
Okay, thank you, Matt, because
my
Chris saying that you've picked a film in this podcast's wheelhouse is, I believe that's accurate, because Chris knows the tone because he picks films for it regularly. So I'm very pleased. Thank you, Matt, for not going well off our normal brief. I appreciate that.
Oh, what, with that power, you mean?
Yeah, because he could have just been... the power that you handed to me as a complete stranger, from my perspective, is terrifying, and I'm glad that Matt did not abuse that power.
Yeah, but you got to remember, his frustration is when I watch the films that are... Do you know what I mean? When I'm watching, Johnny English or whatever, or insert random film.
Yeah,
from the 90s,
quick change, or what was that one? Rent a Kid?
Yeah, I was trying to think of examples. Yeah, but the problem with those is he wouldn't even know. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. He wouldn't know those films.
Mouse Hunt.
Which is why I keep going back to Johnny English. Yeah, Mouse Hunt, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me have a quick.
Yeah.
Me 1 second. Let's find a good example.
While Chris is, can I just add? While Chris is finding an example, I want to make it clear that Chris gave us the hard out. I got the trivia done with 3-4 minutes before the hard out. We are now 3 or 4 minutes after the hard out, and Chris is googling stuff. I just want to make it very clear. I did everything I could to get the trivia done before Chris's hard out, which is starting to feel not so much a hard out. starting to feel soft.
Oh no! It's so I could prepare for something at 11, which I'm just sort of choosing to be less prepared for. So a good example. Stop or My Mum Will Shoot. That's a classic example of I've got to watch Stop or My Mum Will Shoot. That will just make him go, "What the fuck are you doing?" And what I also like is he chose a film that he knew I hadn't seen, and it has always annoyed him to quote for someone so into like film and TV for you never to have seen this film. So we are going to the 80s, I believe, Dan, and we are going to finally watch The Goonies.
Oh, The Goonies! Yes. Very good. That was definitely going to come up on this podcast at some point. I have an interesting relationship with The Goonies in that I saw and enjoyed The Goonies as a kid, but I was very, very confused at the level of excitement my peers, other children had for the movie. I liked the movie. I didn't love the movie, and I will be very interested to see if we can watch the movie and try and figure out why The Goonies, which is such an iconic one for so many children, never quite captured my imagination in the same way. Again, not saying I didn't enjoy The Goonies. I don't want that mob coming after me, but I just never loved it like some people do. Does that make sense? So great choice. Absolutely in our wheelhouse. Probably makes sense to me that the first time this movie's properly come up on this podcast is because someone else has chosen it. Because again, I saw the movie and enjoyed the movie, but it was not the huge part of my childhood that it was for others. So yeah, let's get doing the truffle shuffle, man. Let's do it. I'm excited.
Yeah, I don't know what to. I've never seen it, so I don't know what to think. But I'm both pleased and scared by how it's come about, because it does mean that technically my two choices this year haven't been chosen by me. And you know what I'm like for creating themes for seasons. So it worries me that the next time I come to choose, I'm gonna just go, well, I'll give that to someone else.
If you're listening to this and you know Christopher Billion, get out of the house, because he's about to ask you to choose a film.
Well, I'm wondering, is my next choice after this Christmas? I really am. I really do have it out, but I'm aware what I'm doing to myself now.
Let's. I can quickly check. I've got the schedule up, so let me just check. Nope, you've got one more before Christmas. So you've got this choice, which you just made, and then the choice that goes out on the 9th of December, and then you've got a choice for the 23rd of December.
Okay.
We have to figure out our trilogy, by the way, which ends this series. We need to suss that out too.
Who's got the first? Who's got the first choice?
It's on you. It's on you, baby.
Someone else has decided. Then, Dan. No, I will.
Oh God. The thing is, the trilogy I've always been holding off doing, but because I'm waiting for an opportunity to do it alongside like a new movie in the franchise. And I know that next year there's a new Spider-Man movie, because I've been thinking about the Raimi Spider-Man films for a while, and I know we've got Brand New Day next year, which is filming at the moment. So I'm like, do we line it up with that? Does that mean we've got to wait? I don't know, man.
Yeah, I think we should wait. Spider-Man is the one that, because I don't know if you remember, we chose Spider-Man at one point and then realised there was a more appropriate trilogy to do instead. I think right? I chose Spider-Man, and I did it like early. I just made the choice. I was just like, Spider-Man, and we were like, okay. And then I voice noted you a few days later and was like, The Rings of Power is coming out. It really should be Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Okay, and I just looked it up. So Brand New Day is currently scheduled, assuming there's no delays, to come out the 31st of July 2026, and we are in season July.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah,
next year. So we kind of that kind of has to be Spider-Man, doesn't it?
Yeah, there are plenty others though. Let me just do a quick. We've got the other Star Wars. We probably don't want to do that. We've got The Godfather, but that seems a bit out of scope. Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy.
We could do. I had a list of trilogies somewhere. One second. I already did this list, so to speak. Yeah. The Mummy. The Mummy trilogy is fun. We could do that. I feel like for Chris, though, for you, like something more like the Hangover trilogy feels like more of your vibe.
Yeah, but arguably, maybe I'm not choosing this year.
Yeah, that's true. I guess there's the Evil Dead trilogy, there's the Alien trilogy, but that I feel like would become a quadrilogy if we did that. So yeah, there's thoughts to be made there. We've still not done any of the Terminator films.
Ocean's 11 would be a mad one, but have we already done Ocean's 11, the first one? I think we might have.
I'm not sure. I don't think we have. So yeah, there's definitely a few choices. I'll have to have a think on that one. But yeah, in terms of the series after the current series that we're in, the series of Rewind Reviews, it's going to be happening around July next year. That's going to be Spider-Man, isn't it? It's going to have to be. Because we've got 3 podcasts around its release. We've got the 21st, the 28th, and the 4th, and it comes out on like the 30th. So, Spider-Man ahoy! It's looking like for that one.
Yeah, we have to wait for that one, I think, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we will work it out. We will work it out, and we will go from there.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. As always, you can get us in the usual places. Mail at nothingbutstatic.co.uk. If you've got thoughts on this, you can support us by continuing to listen or sharing with a friend or commenting and reviewing on any of the platforms. And if you go to Spotify and just hit review and just give us a star rating, that actually just massively helps because it makes Spotify more likely to share it with others. The same if you leave a review on iTunes or any platform that you use. It's always helpful. You can obviously head to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic UK, where you can like and subscribe and all that jazz to any of the stuff we've put out on there. That also helps share what we do with others. Of course, if you'd like to support us financially, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic will allow you to, for as little as $1 a month, get episodes of this very podcast 1 week early. So if you're desperate to hear our thoughts on the Goonies, you can go over to Patreon right now and hear that episode. That's I think everything. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. And this has been a long one, I appreciate, but I feel like this was a good episode. I think we had a solid review, and I am pleased with the trivia and how it turned out. I do think that story is really interesting, and I'm really, really happy with how I managed to pull all of the various stories together into any sort of cohesive, because reading them was a nightmare. It was all over the place. I couldn't work out what order and what things happened. I was reading about this and that, and I was just my head was just in my hands. I don't know how I'm going to present this information to a person. But yeah, we got there. So I'm really pleased. Yeah, so that's everything for this week. I'm gonna pass over to Chris, who ends this, but thank you all very much for listening.
I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
Sorry, I was looking at a list of sequel films coming out this year to see if I could find anything that was relevant.
I knew you were doing something that wasn't the thing you should be doing, which is wrapping this up, Mr. Hardout.
Yeah. My name's Chris Billingham.
My name's Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.
Finally.